Chapter 121, Martial Temple. Lin Jiufeng entered the land of negative energy and began his daily routine of signing in and quietly cultivating. If it were anyone else, they might not even be able to last a day in a place like this. The land of extreme negative energy was cold and gloomy. Buried deep underground, the land of extreme negative energy was cold and gloomy. Although spiritual energy seeped into the place from the outside, there were tombs and vengeful spirits everywhere. Without sufficient strength, one wouldn't be able to remain here for too long. As for those people who were powerful enough, they had no reason to stay in the land of extreme negative energy. Only Lin Jiufeng could sign in here. Thus, the land of extreme negative energy that seemed boring to the others had countless treasures for him. He continued his daily routine in peace. Whenever he signed in, if the rewards were treasures, he would keep them. If they were treasured swords, he would store them in the sword case. If he obtained pills, he would give them to the white cat to eat. If he obtained cultivation techniques, he would cultivate in them. His strength steadily increased. Lin Jiufeng was satisfied with his current status. He focused on improving himself. He didn't care about the outside world at all. Without Dachuan, Lin Jiufeng's only means of communication to the outside world was practically gone. He was completely cut off from the outside world. But it did not matter, however, for he had always planned on improving himself in the land of extreme negative energy. Under Emperor De's leadership, the Xuanhuang God Dynasty fully exerted its strength and influence. In the first year after Lin Jiufeng entered the land of extreme negative energy, Emperor De started building martial temples on a large scale. He made it so that martial temples had grades. The lowest grade of martial temples had even spread to remote towns and villages. The martial temples were created with the will of the dynasty supporting it. Emperor De moved the royal library into the martial temples and built a huge martial temple academy beside the Wei River. Its size was enough to accommodate at least 50,000 talented students. Emperor De then asked the retired soldiers to become teachers in the martial temples located in remote villages and towns. As a result, the lack of teachers in the lowest grades of martial temples was solved. The retired and old soldiers didn't protest against this arrangement. After all, they now had a place to go and entertain themselves after their retirement. What's more, their welfare was now also in the hands of the dynasty after they retired from the army. The martial temples were built fast and they became famous throughout the world. Countless people wanted to know what the conditions were to join a martial temple. Emperor De discussed with the court officials for a long time. Bearing great pressure upon himself, he decided. Free admission. As long as they were the people of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty, their children could enter the martial temples for free as long as they wanted to. Emperor De knew that the martial temples weren't so attractive to the children of the aristocratic families or the sects. But a problem remained: these martial temples couldn't attract the attention of the aristocratic families and the sects. Despite moving the royal library into one of the martial temples, despite ordering the royal consecrators to take charge of the highly graded martial temples, these temples still couldn't attract the children of those aristocratic families and most members of the sects. Emperor De and the court officials spent a long time trying to figure out what to do. In the end, it was still the cabinet chief of 4 dynasties who remained determined. He decided, since we can't attract the descendants of those aristocratic families, we won't force them. Let's focus on the biggest group of people in the world for now. The marginalized people. Emperor De's eyes lit up. Yes, the marginalized people, the poor, or what we call those at the bottom of society. They have worked tirelessly throughout their lives. To support their families, they had no choice but to sacrifice themselves. The cabinet chief nodded. His eyes sparkled as boundless strength surged from his aged body. He was speaking for the poor, the people at the bottom of society. He was seeking benefits for them. As a scholar who had studied his entire life, he had already done all that a scholar must do. To establish one's heart for the world, to establish one's life for the living, to inherit the ultimate techniques for the sake of rebirth, and to establish peace for all generations to come. Your Majesty. Everyone knows how talented the children of those aristocratic families are. That's right. They are talented. But the children of aristocratic families were born with resources that others would never be able to obtain in their entire lives. No matter how talented they are, we can't rope them to our side. Only the common people at the bottom of society and only the billions of marginalized people are the future of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. The cabinet chief solemnly stated. Among the descendants of the aristocratic families, 1 in 100 can become a genius. If nurtured properly, they will eventually become a cornerstone of their family. The commoners and the marginalized people cannot compare to them. But we just need 1 genius out of 1,000. If this isn't possible, then 1 genius out of 10,000 is still enough. According to this ratio, we can crush the aristocratic families and the sects with sheer numbers. As long as we can withstand the pressure and nurture them carefully, they will be the future of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. In this golden era, the survival of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty into the next generations depends on the children of the poor. When they grow up, the Xuanhuang God Dynasty will no longer be restricted by the wealth of the aristocratic families and the deterrence of the sections. The cabinet chief enthusiastically shared his ideals. The reason for allowing every person from all walks of life to enter the martial temples for free wasn't for altruism, but for the sake of reaping benefits for the dynasty in the future. Emperor De was invigorated. He instantly made a decision. Okay, anyone is allowed to enroll for free. As long as they are the people of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty, no matter who they are, as long as they are not more than 18 years old, they can enter a martial temple to study, cultivate, and test their talents. Your Majesty is wise. This is a reform that will benefit the nation and the people for thousands of years to come. The cabinet chief knelt in respect. The court officials all cheered. Your Majesty is wise. Emperor De muttered in his heart, I just don't want to see the Xuanhuang God Dynasty being constantly threatened by the aristocratic families and the sections. That's all. In Lin Jiufeng's first year in the land of extreme negative energy, martial temples were built and were widely promoted. More than 10 million humble-class students enrolled in the first year of their establishment. They were distributed in the various martial temples in the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. This result made Emperor De excited. Emperor De also built a wordless monument for Lin Jiufeng in every martial temple of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. The wordless in the wordless monument meant that words weren't necessary to express Lin Jiufeng's contributions to the world. This wordless monument stood in front of every martial temple. Every student that walked into a martial temple would always see it as they walked by. Lin Jiufeng's display of might when he killed those supremacies last year silenced the entire world. Emperor De took advantage of this respite to establish the martial temples. His move displeased the aristocratic families and the sects. But none of them dared to stop him. They didn't dare to do so. They were afraid that Lin Jiufeng would draw his sword and annihilate them. But what they didn't know, however, was that Lin Jiufeng was already in seclusion in the land of extreme negative energy. He was hard at work on improving his cultivation base. In his first year in the land of extreme negative energy, he cultivated in the Yin-Yang Mandara Great Domain to further bolster his strength. He corrected the path that he had taken wrongly in the past and he managed to expand his domain several times than its previous size. Even now, it was still expanding. Both Lin Jiufeng and Emperor De gained a lot this year. Lin Jiufeng gained strength while Emperor De gained talents. The second year. The third year. The fourth year. The fifth year. For 5 consecutive years, the world remained relatively quiet. Lin Jiufeng's deterrence when he killed those 15 supremacies with a sword move forced the world into silence for 5 years. These 5 years bought Emperor De a lot of time. He built martial temples, groomed students, recruited powerhouses, established the uniformed royal guards, and established the dark net. He prepared sets after sets of treasured items and planned spies in various tumultuous regions. Emperor De sat upright in the Forbidden City. Using the world as a chessboard, he began to play chess. The emperor's aura on him had become even more domineering in the 5 years that passed. He had grown so wise that his schemes had become unfathomable. Even Princess Yulin found it hard to know what this brother of hers wanted to do when she saw him. But as long as it was for the good of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty and for the welfare of the people, she would always support him. Sister, when are you going to make a breakthrough into the supremacy realm? Emperor De asked Princess Yulin. I'm waiting for a spring rain, Princess Yulin replied with a faint smile. The so-called spring rain was an opportunity for her. She needed an opportunity, an epiphany, to become a supremacy. Chapter 122, God's Domain. Princess Yulin had been studying Lin Jiufeng's sword strike for the past 5 years. The more she understood, the weaker she felt. This weakness existed in her own understanding. But she could not be blamed, for she had never known what true power was. As a result, she didn't know that she was weak. In the past, Princess Yulin thought that among the cultivators in this world, she was relatively strong. But after seeing Lin Jiufeng's sword strike, she realized how ignorant she was. Hence, Princess Yulin decided to cultivate diligently. She traveled the world in the past 5 years. She didn't stay in the Unrivalled God Dynasty nor stayed behind closed doors to cultivate. She walked past the misty lands of Xuanhuang holding an oil paper umbrella. Her skirt slightly fluttered in the wind. She walked across the plains outside the dynasty and went to Wolf Story Mountain, where she once fought for her freedom. She traveled far and wide, paying her respects to the Tao ancestors in the famous mountains and great rivers of the Taoist sects. Under the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower, she prayed softly and wished that Buddha protected Lin Jiufeng. 5 years later, she returned to the imperial capital to see her brother. In the past 5 years of traveling the world, how many sights have you seen? Emperor De lovingly looked at his younger sister. A smile was on his face. The shrewd Emperor De in the eyes of the world had become gentle before Princess Yulin. In the past 5 years, countless people had come to ask for her hand in marriage. The descendants of aristocratic families, sect geniuses, hegemons from other countries, and even the rising talents of the Unrivalled God Dynasty. They were all charmed by Princess Yulin's beauty. For her hand in marriage, they even promised to only take her as their wives for their entire lives. But Emperor De rejected them all. If Princess Yulin doesn't want to marry, then she shan't marry in her entire life. She has her family to accompany her if she feels lonely. The signal that Emperor De gave to the world was that he very much doted on Princess Yulin. This pair of siblings had deeply loved each other for more than 30 years. Since the time they were born, they have cared for each other. Even now, their love and care for each other still existed. Brother Emperor, the major sects in the world have changed hands a few times in the years that passed. It's very hard to understand what belongs to who now and whose territory belonged to whom, Princess Yulin explained. Every famous mountain and even the great rivers of the Taoist sects have changed owners. All sorts of terrifying sects have emerged one after another, including the Essence Chi sect in the plains, the Temple of Gods in the wildlands, the 6 paths of the demonic sects, and the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower of the Buddhist sects. Princess Yulin wore a solemn look. Emperor De looked up into the sky and sighed. That's right. The recovery rate of the world's spiritual energy had increased so fast that even though I have no spare time to cultivate, I still managed to make a breakthrough into the human god realm with the help of a few treasures. It seems that those terrifying sects have started to notice this change, and they are now making their presence known to this world, one after another. Especially the Quanjin sect of the Taoist sects. I heard that immortals once existed in this sect in the past. I reckon that they would be too strong for this world if they reappeared. Princess Yulin added. It's not just the Taoist sects. You've also been to the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower that recently appeared, right? Bodhisattvas and Arhats live there. 2 of the 3 Buddhist sects in the Zhongnan area have already sided with them. Emperor De was full of worries. There's also the 6 paths of reincarnation of the demonic sects. They are yet again another bunch of terrifying experts. The appearance of various priests and their temples in the wildlands has further divided the world. There's also the hidden forces and the terrifying existences overseas. I also heard rumors that the Essence Chi God in the plains is about to return. With all of these added up, it would be surprising if the world right now wouldn't be chaotic. The only thing that we can do is to do our best to stabilize the Unrivalled God Dynasty and nurture geniuses. This way, we can buy enough time until Big Grand Uncle returns. Emperor De shared his worries with his sister. Although he was the emperor, he wasn't that powerful, to begin with. Now that he didn't have Lin Jiufeng's support, he was really afraid of making a mistake that would spell the end of the dynasty. But he couldn't tell anyone else about his worries. He had to keep it in his heart and make plans for the world. He had to continue the facade of a scheming and shrewd emperor. No one has to know that he was scared deep inside. If he made a mistake, he would lose everything. The entire Yuhua God dynasty might very well collapse in his reign. Brother Emperor. Since I've already returned, I won't be leaving anymore. Princess Yulin smiled. Good, very good. It's a great coincidence that you returned this time. Recently, the Zenith Heaven Path sect is on the move once again. They have always been making a few small moves here and there, but it seems that they still have no idea that I already know everything about their schemes. I was just worried that no one could deal with them. Emperor Dis sneered. The Zenith Heaven Path sect has made a fortune in secret. I wonder, just how much of their original strength have they recovered by now? We have to be careful in dealing with them. Princess Yulin advised. It's fine. I have my own ways to deal with the Zenith Heaven Path sect. They are so close to the imperial capital, yet they still want to jump around. What a joke. Emperor De coldly snorted. Since you've just returned, you should rest for a few days and accompany Mother for a while. Then afterwards, I want you to make a trip to the Zenith Heaven Path sect and coerce them into depositing all of their secret manuals into our martial temples. Emperor De said. They'll be mad. Princess Yulin looked at Emperor De in surprise. To coerce a sect into publicizing their secret manuals and techniques. That was an offense, no less than trying to annihilate their sect itself. I won't give them a chance to be mad. Just do what I say. I will handle everything, Emperor De said confidently. The war machine that Lin Jiufeng gave to him 5 years ago had remained in seclusion for the past 5 years. It continuously absorbed spiritual energy as it did its best to recover its original strength. After 5 years, it was about time for it to make a move. Our enemies have become restless once again after these 5 years of peace. If we suppressed the Zenith Heaven Path sect this time, that would be akin to killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Alright, I shall use them to intimidate our enemies. Our enemies should just fight each other in the cultivation world. As long as they do not deliberately provoke the Yuhua God dynasty, there should be no problems. Emperor De silently thought. It was time to reveal the trump card that Lin Jiufeng gave to him back then. 5 years passed in the cold palace. Dust and cobwebs were everywhere. After being uninhabited for such a long time, it wasn't strange that it became like this. Without Lin Jiufeng and the White Cat, the cold palace lost its sense of life and its condition rapidly deteriorated. Deep underground, in the land of extreme negative energy. Lin Jiufeng never once went out in the past 5 years. His strength rapidly improved as he continuously signed in and received valuable treasures, day after day. But most of them were consumed by the White Cat. Speaking of the White Cat, she successfully made a breakthrough into the Grotto Heaven realm. Lin Jiufeng also managed to receive a divine-grade Grotto Heaven as a daily reward. He immediately gave it to the White Cat. Lin Jiufeng treated the White Cat very well. He exerted a lot of energy when he opened up the White Cat's Grotto Heaven and integrated it with the divine-grade Grotto Heaven that he gave the White Cat. As a result of his actions, the White Cat's potential was greatly increased. Her cultivation base's foundation had also become deeper. This way, the White Cat could be like Lin Jiufeng. She could walk the path of strengthening her one and only Grotto Heaven. She did not have to form other Grotto Heavens to advance in her cultivation. Today, Lin Jiufeng visited a tomb. Sign in, Lin Jiufeng said. Sign in successful. Received 4 symbols purgatory array. A huge formation blueprint and 4 statues appeared in Lin Jiufeng's hands. The 4 symbols symbolized the vermilion bird, the azure dragon, the black tortoise, and the white tiger. When the 4 statues and the formation blueprint were activated, a huge array formation would appear. It's a pity that it isn't too useful to me. The White Cat also has no use for this either. Lin Jiufeng shook his head and stored the array into his domain. It's time for me to make a breakthrough into an even higher realm, Lin Jiufeng muttered. He had already cultivated his domain to an extremely terrifying level. According to the introduction of the Yin-Yang Mandara Great Domain technique, Lin Jiufeng discovered that his domain had surpassed every domain ever recorded. With his domain not having a name, Lin Jiufeng himself gave it a name. God's Domain. The meaning behind the name was simple. In his domain, he was a god. An omnipotent god. Chapter 123, War Machine. The land of extreme negative energy was not a place of peace. There were many dangers hidden in its corners. Attacks from ghosts. Attacks from evil spirits. Attacks from soul remnants. But all of these combined couldn't compare to Lin Jiufeng's God's Domain. If anything were to attack, Lin Jiufeng only needed to activate his God's Domain. All evil would vanish without a trace. Lin Jiufeng was invincible in the land of extreme negative energy. But he continued his routine of signing in quietly and cultivating in peace. He was neither anxious nor impatient as he steadily advanced his cultivation base. He was a man of his words when it came to matters of the outside world. He really didn't ask nor worry about them. Even if the outside world was in a mess, he also wouldn't care or ask about it. He believed in Emperor D and the Zenith Heaven Path Sect's war machine. Emperor De, whom Lin Jiufeng trusted, has been targeting the Daluo Dao for the past few days. After 5 years of constant development, the Zenith Heaven Path Sect's overall strength rapidly improved. They dug out many of their sect elders from the previous era, especially those at the Supremacy Realm. The return of these people strengthened the prestige of the sect. They began to infiltrate the Xuanhuang God Dynasty as high-ranking officials. Perhaps it was because those with great power wouldn't bother to use their brains. Their methods were extremely crude, allowing Emperor De to see through them at a glance. The Zenith Heaven Path Sect's ambitions were wild. Some of the spies arranged by Emperor De had also infiltrated deeply into the Zenith Heaven Path Sect. 2 of them became core disciples, and more importantly, the Zenith Heaven Path Sect still hadn't discovered their existence. Perhaps they felt that Emperor De wouldn't dare to do such a thing, or perhaps they felt that they were powerful enough as long as they weren't going up against that old monster in the imperial capital. They felt that they would definitely be fine. Powerful people were confident. Confident people were often conceited. This was a principle that remained unchanged since time immemorial. The Zenith Heaven Path Sect disdained to use these scheming methods. In the entire Xuanhuang God Dynasty, other than Lin Jiufeng, who was living in seclusion, no one else was worthy of their attention. Under their coercion and bribery, more than 100 officials in the imperial capital sided with the Zenith Heaven Path Sect. Emperor De secretly got his people to investigate these officials for these few days. At night, Forbidden City, Great Council Hall. Emperor De sat in the dark and cold hall. There was no lamplight. Moonlight shone in and illuminated Emperor De's face. Half of the hall was bright, the other half was dark. In the bright area stood Princess Yulin. In the darkness, shadow scouts hid in the dark as they made their report. Your Majesty, we have investigated all 122 officials controlled by the Zenith Heaven Path Sect within the imperial capital. Among them, 50 have completely sided with the Zenith Heaven Path Sect. They have been thoroughly corrupted. The remaining 50 are neutral. They are indecisive. They are being blackmailed by the Zenith Heaven Path Sect, or some of their families are now under the Zenith Heaven Path Sect's control. 22 senior officials have also been brainwashed by the Zenith Heaven Path Sect to become their puppets. The Shadow Scout said. When Emperor De and Princess Yulin heard the report, their faces simultaneously darkened. To think that there would be so many officials under their control. Emperor De was so angry that he gnashed his teeth. His voice turned completely cold. And this is only because the Zenith Heaven Path had only started taking action recently. It's because they are afraid of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty's guardian deity that only so few officials are under their control. Princess Yulin added. We must teach Zenith Heaven Path Sect a lesson. Sister, you have to go. Emperor De looked at Princess Yulin. All right. Princess Yulin nodded. She also wanted to teach the Zenith Heaven Path sect a lesson. Take this person with you. I will teach you the method to control him. Emperor De stretched out his hand and pointed. A stream of information entered Princess Yulin's mind. He did not remain secretive with his method of controlling the war machine. He directly told Princess Yulin about it. Princess Yulin's eyes lit up. She looked at Emperor De and said in surprise, "So this is your trump card?" Emperor De nodded. "Then I shall go now. We will definitely suppress the Zenith Heaven Path sect today." Princess Yulin turned around and left the Great Council Hall. She soared to the skies. Boom! She didn't hide her aura at all. Her aura directly filled the sky and transformed into a resplendent swordlight that shot into the Zenith Heaven Path sect's mountaintop. With the return of many powerhouses, the members of the Zenith Heaven Path sect became confident. They built the mountaintop in a very imposing manner, truly having the appearance of a large sect. In the winding mountain range, there were pavilions and buildings. In the immortal mist, there were mountains, waterfalls, and purple bamboos. In recent years, the Zenith Heaven Path sect had also recruited a few thousand disciples and taught them diligently. The sect was booming. Their ambitions gradually inflated as they set their eyes on the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. They made their plans in advance to thoroughly infiltrate the imperial capital of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. Then, once their moles became successful enough in their official positions, they would launch a coup. But Emperor De saw through all of these. Boom! Princess Yulin's aura was very conspicuous in the night. In the Zenith Heaven Path sect, dozens of auras rose rapidly in response. Who dares to barge here during the night and challenge the Zenith Heaven Path sect? How dare you provoke the Zenith Heaven Path? A woman at the Grotto Heaven realm dares to come and provoke our Zenith Heaven Path? The powerhouses who had just returned to their sect angrily rebuked. They were about to act and defeat Princess Yulin. In their eyes, a Grotto Heaven realm cultivator wasn't worth mentioning at all. But at the crucial moment, sect leader Luo Yu appeared. He recognized Princess Yulin and hurriedly stood out to say, "Princess Yulin has graced us with your presence. May I know your purpose for visiting us?" The appearance of sect leader Luo Yu suppressed those voices, but they still stared at Princess Yulin with dissatisfaction. They were preparing their true bodies, ready to act at any moment. Princess Yulin looked at sect master Luo Yu. Then, she replied with a cold look. "The Zenith Heaven Path sect infiltrated my Xuanhuang God Dynasty with the intention of rebelling. Do you dare to admit your crimes?" She went straight to the point and directly denounced them. Princess Yulin was a straightforward person after all. Sect leader Luo Yu frowned. He looked at the overbearing Princess Yulin and his attitude also became cold. He replied, "Princess Yulin, I wish that you don't talk nonsense. My Zenith Heaven Path sect has abided by every law in the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. You are just pressing false charges, so you can get rid of us." "False charges?" Princess Yulin sneered. She walked in the air, her clothes fluttered in the wind while her black hair cascaded down like a waterfall. Her beautiful face carried a trace of holiness to it as she replied, "You're saying that I am falsely accusing you? Then so be it. I will only give you two choices. Either the Zenith Heaven Path sect will be wiped out, or the sect will publicize every secret manual or technique in their possession and take the initiative to send them to the martial temples of my Xuanhuang God Dynasty." Sect leader Luo Yu's face instantly turned as cold as winter. His gaze focused on Princess Yulin. His fury ignited. Making a sect that had existed for thousands of years to contribute all their secret manual and cultivation techniques was no different from destroying the sect itself. What an arrogant little girl! The Xuanhuang God Dynasty is just a secular dynasty, yet it dares to be so arrogant? You are seeking death. If you dare to make the Zenith Heaven Path sect offer up our cultivation techniques and secret manuals, you will never make it out of here alive. In an instant, the entire Zenith Heaven Path sect exploded in anger. A Supremacy Realm expert instantly rushed out and raised his hand to strike. A domain instantly enveloped the area. He directly aimed to take Princess Yulin's life. He was furious. This sudden attack of Princess Yulin directly broke the people's trust in the Zenith Heaven Path sect. Boom! A dark domain smashed down. It instantly restricted Princess Yulin's movements. Die! An old man's cold voice came from the Zenith Heaven Path sect. Sect leader Luo Yu only watched on indifferently. He didn't stop them. But he seemed to be worried as he glanced in the direction of the imperial capital. Yes. He was worried that the mysterious guardian deity of the God Dynasty would take action. But as Princess Yulin's movements were restricted, the imperial capital remained silent. Sect leader Luo Yu gradually relaxed. But in the very next moment, his eyes widened in disbelief. Princess Yulin sneered. A 3-meter-tall giant suddenly rushed out from behind her. Its palm struck down like lightning. Boom! The mountain gate that the entire Zenith Heaven Path sect had painstakingly built exploded. The dark domain was also shattered with a slap. Pooh! An old man spat out a mouthful of blood. His face became as pale as a dead man's. His pupils widened as he uttered in horror. That is our war machine. Chapter 124, 2 options, choose one. With a single palm, the entire Zenith Heaven Path sect trembled as it was suppressed. The glorious and imposing mountain gate disappeared in an instant. It turned into dust. The ground split apart, and a mountain peak directly collapsed. The many people in the Zenith Heaven Path sect were all shocked and they flew out at once. Especially the old man who attacked. His dark domain was directly shattered. Not only did he vomit large mouthfuls of blood, but he also discovered a terrifying fact. Ever since the day of the Zenith Heaven Path sect's recovery, they had been constantly in search of the war machine. They never once gave up. The war machine was a secret weapon of the Zenith Heaven Path sect. It was a terrifying existence that had been continuously refined by their seniors from one era to another. The Zenith Heaven Path sect couldn't give up their search for it. But despite searching for more than 10 years, they still had no news about it. The people of the Zenith Heaven Path sect gradually lost their motivation to look for the war machine. They knew that the area below the imperial capital was the land of extreme negative energy, but no one knew where exactly its entrance was. In the end, they decided to take control of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty first before they looked for the war machine once more. But who knew that this would happen? Tonight, Princess Yulin arrived with the war machine that they had been looking for. Sure enough, as soon as the war machine attacked, it displayed terrifying might. Why was the Zenith Heaven Path sect looking for the war machine? Why were they unwilling to give it up? Why was sect leader Luo Yu so confident that the Zenith Heaven Path sect wouldn't be erased out of existence as long as they had the war machine? At this moment, the answer was displayed in the attack of the war machine. Boom! The entire Zenith Heaven Path sect was shrouded in smoke and dust. In the dark night, terrifying powerhouses with profound auras stood in the air. Their faces looked ugly, to say the least. They looked at Princess Yulin, and then at the war machine that stood behind her like a huge mountain. He wore a large black jacket that covered his entire body. His face was hidden underneath a hat as he protected Princess Yulin. Although his face could not be clearly seen, he had never been a stranger to the Zenith Heaven Path sect. The war machine. He was the pride and joy of the Zenith Heaven Path sect. But now, he was standing on the opposite side of the sect. There was deep confusion in everyone's eyes. Why did the war machine of their sect fall into the hands of Princess Yulin? Sect leader Luo Yu's body trembled. He stretched out his hand and pointed a quivering finger at the war machine. The war machine that he had spent so much effort to find over the past decade was now standing before him as an enemy. Sect leader Luo Yu found it hard to accept. What was even more unacceptable to him was the news that the old Taoist priest brought. The old Taoist priest's expression looked ugly. He stepped through the air and stated, "Supremacy Changza has died." The people of the Zenith Heaven Path sect were shocked. Sect leader Luo Yu's body trembled as he cried out, Supremacy Chanza is one of the 9 supremacies of the Zenith Heaven Path sect. He's so powerful, but he died just like that? Their war machine killed a supremacy with a single slap? Why did Sect Master Luo Yu feel that this war machine in front of him had become even more terrifying compared to what it was from the previous era? The old Taoist priest looked at the war machine. There was hatred in his eyes, but it was mostly directed at Princess Yulin. He gritted his teeth and said, "Where did you get that war machine?" Hearing this question, the people from the Zenith Heaven Path sect stared at Princess Yulin with widened eyes. They wanted to know the answer to this question. Especially sect leader Luo Yu. He stared at her without blinking. Princess Yulin was unscathed under the protection of the war machine. Her face was cold as she looked at the Zenith Heaven Path sect powerhouses surrounding her. She remained unafraid at all. "You don't need to know where I got this war machine. All that you need to know is that from now on, the war machine belongs to the Unrivalled God Dynasty, and me, Princess Yulin, it does not belong to the Zenith Heaven Path sect anymore," Princess Yulin said coldly. As soon as her words came out, the entire Zenith Heaven Path sect felt their hearts ache. Their eyes instantly turned red as they stared at Princess Yulin. It was like they were staring at the enemy who had killed their parents. This feeling was akin to the hatred towards an enemy who had killed their fathers or snatched their wives away. Or perhaps even more intense than those. Sect leader Luo Yu pointed at Princess Yulin and said sternly, "That is the war machine of the Zenith Heaven Path sect. It was refined by the ancestors of our Zenith Heaven Path sect generations after generations." Princess Yulin was completely unmoved. The corners of her mouth curled up. "Since he's from the Zenith Heaven Path sect, why don't you try calling him?" This attitude of hers was extremely contemptuous. Sect leader Luo Yu became so angry that he felt dizzy. He pointed at Princess Yulin and gnashed his teeth in hatred. But he didn't dare to make a move. The scene of Supremacy Chanza being killed just now with a slap was still vivid in his mind. No one in the entire sect dared to make a move. Because they understood the war machine better than anyone else. They knew how terrifying the war machine was once he started fighting. "Sect leader, calm down. The war machine once fought with the powerhouses from Quanjin sect. Although he was at a disadvantage, he didn't lose. We aren't its match," the old Taoist priest hurriedly advised. Sect leader Luo Yu waved his hand indicating that he was calm and didn't need persuasion from anyone. "Princess Yulin, can you return the war machine to my sect?" Sect leader Luo Yu couldn't help but ask. Princess Yulin looked at sect leader Luo Yu like he was an idiot. She was too lazy to answer this stupid question. "As I said just now, I will give you 2 choices. Which one will you choose?" Princess Yulin coldly asked. Sect leader Luo Yu's face darkened again. The others looked the same. They stared at Princess Yulin as they gnashed their teeth in hatred. They clenched their fists and wished that they could directly hammer Princess Yulin to death. If she didn't have the war machine, they would have made their move right there and then. We cannot casually give away the techniques and manuals passed down by our ancestors to us. Sect leader Luo Yu gritted his teeth and said stiffly. Then, the Zenith Heaven Path sect will no longer exist from today onwards. Princess Yulin waved her hand indifferently. The war machine took a step forward. Boom! An extremely terrifying pressure swept across the world, making it difficult for the people of the Zenith Heaven Path sect to breathe. Their faces turned pale as they watched in horror. How terrifying! The war machine was already in its peak state. Wait! Sect leader Luo Yu raised his hand and yelled. He felt aggrieved as he watched the work that the Zenith Heaven Path sect was most proud of actually came to destroy its creator, the Zenith Heaven Path sect. Sect leader Luo Yu's heart was bleeding. Seeing Princess Yulin's attitude, if he didn't choose to give up all of their cultivation techniques and manuals, the Zenith Heaven Path definitely wouldn't have a good ending today. I will choose to donate every cultivation technique and secret manual of the Zenith Heaven Path sect to the martial temples. Sect leader Luo Yu had to use all his strength to finish the sentence. The members of the Zenith Heaven Path sect were moved as they looked at this scene. They opened their mouths, wanting to refute. But they knew that they couldn't do anything considering their position. The war machine was right in front of them. If they didn't make a choice, then the war machine would choose for them. It was either being destroyed or donating their cultivation techniques. After sect leader Luo Yu said these words, he seemed to have considerably aged. But Princess Yulin didn't care about these. Her eyes remained cold as her clothes fluttered. She looked like a celestial maiden that had descended to the mortal realm. Then, she said, I'll give you 3 days. 3 days later, every cultivation technique and manuals of the Zenith Heaven Path must be sent to the martial temples. If even a single technique or manual is missing, the war machine will come and destroy the Zenith Heaven Path sect. After saying this, Princess Yulin turned around and left. The war machine also left with her. They left behind a devastated Zenith Heaven Path sect and a group of powerhouses whose hearts were bleeding. Chapter 125, 80 Years. Princess Yulin brought along the war machine to suppress the Zenith Heaven Path sect. She directly suppressed them to the point of depression. To donate all of their cultivation techniques and manuals to the martial temples, how humiliating was that? But they had no choice. They could only accept it without resisting. Those from the Zenith Heaven Path sect felt their hearts bleed. Their proudest war machine has forced them to do something that would betray their ancestors. Where exactly did the Xuanhuang God Dynasty dig out the war machine? In the first place, how did they manage to operate it? Sect leader Luo Yu couldn't figure out the answer to these questions no matter how hard he thought. In the Forbidden City, Princess Yulin returned with the war machine. She handed the war machine over to Emperor De. But Emperor De said, "Take it. With the war machine, you will be the new guardian deity of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty." Princess Yulin shook her head and refused. "I want to make a breakthrough into the supremacy realm on my own. The war machine is a burden to me. Relying on external forces would only slow down her progress." When Emperor De heard this, he didn't force the matter anymore. He let the war machine stand quietly in the shadows. "Why can't we directly destroy the Zenith Heaven Path sect?" Princess Yulin looked at Emperor De with a puzzled look. The Zenith Heaven Path sect was obviously up to no good. Why should they not eliminate them directly? With the war machine, it would be easy to destroy the Zenith Heaven Path sect. This way, they do not have to be on guard against the Zenith Heaven Path sect anymore. Emperor De smiled and replied, "Sister, the matters of the world aren't just about fighting and killing, but also about the ways of the world. A dead Zenith Heaven Path sect is definitely advantageous to us, but they are not as useful anymore if they are gone." Princess Yulin looked at Emperor De. She was still confused. She was obsessed with cultivation and had no idea about these complicated matters. The Zenith Heaven Path sect is like a double-edged sword. It can hurt the user and can also hurt others, but as long as the user wears armor, the Zenith Heaven Path sect can only hurt others. Manipulate the Zenith Heaven Path sect into becoming a sharp sword of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. Isn't that better than just outright killing them? Asked Emperor De. But how are you going to control them? Princess Yulin asked. With the war machine. Emperor De pointed with his finger and said confidently. He knew that the war machine was the target that the Zenith Heaven Path sect had been looking for all this. Using the war machine to control and mobilize the Zenith Heaven Path sect was a plan that was likely to succeed. As expected, I'm not suitable for these schemes. Princess Yulin ridiculed herself. Emperor De looked at Princess Yulin enviously and said from the bottom of his heart said, "Do you also think that I like to scheme? When I was young, I loved cultivating more than you. I didn't want to be the emperor. My dream was to travel to the ends of the world with my sword and climb the great mountains of cultivation." Princess Yulin looked at her brother. She instantly knew that he was speaking from his heart. Before Princess Yulin started cultivating, Emperor De was the youngest martial sage in the dynasty, if not, the entire world. He had a promising future. But after all these years, he became obsessed with power. He plotted against the world and plotted for the people to govern the dynasty. However, the youngest martial sage 10 years ago was only at the human god realm. "Sister, carry with you my dreams and overcome every obstacle on your path in the world of cultivation." Your brother Emperor will handle these dirty matters on his own. Emperor De held Princess Yulin's hand and said gently. Before Big Granduncle went into seclusion, I vowed that I would prove to him that I am not inferior to both Father Emperor and Grandpa Emperor. Since the Yuhua God Dynasty has been passed down to me, it will definitely reach its golden age. When Big Granduncle comes out of seclusion, this dynasty will still be the Yuhua God Dynasty that he once knew. Emperor De announced in a clear and loud voice. To fulfill his promise, he racked his brains and worked hard. Princess Yulin didn't say anything. But she held Emperor De's hand tightly. Time flew. In a blink of an eye, it has already been 20 years since Lin Jiufeng secluded himself in the land of extreme negative energy. He gained a lot in the 20 years that passed. The cultivation techniques that Lin Jiufeng received from signing in every day were transformed by him into energy that he integrated into his own comprehension of the Tao. Every cultivation technique in his possession became talismans that entered his domain, Dantian, and True Qi. Lin Jiufeng only had to raise his hand and the amalgamation of tens of thousands of cultivation techniques would erupt with his will. A single strand of his True Qi now contained these terrifying cultivation techniques. Over the years, Lin Jiufeng toured through the entire land of extreme negative energy. Lin Jiufeng had also signed in at the tombs of the various powerhouses that had died here long ago. The top peerless techniques of the previous era were now living inside Lin Jiufeng's body. Right now, even Lin Jiufeng himself had no idea how powerful he was. Lin Jiufeng only knew that after more than 20 years of seclusion, he finally started to understand the meaning of the word invincible. Invincible equals Lin Jiufeng. On a large rock in the land of extreme negative energy, Lin Jiufeng opened his eyes. Countless cultivation techniques flitted past his eyes as they opened. In a blink of an eye, he wrapped up his cultivation of the tens of thousands of cultivation techniques that he had gathered so far. It seems that it's been 80 years since I came to this world. Lin Jiufeng lamented. 80 years ago, he transmigrated into this world. His cultivation was crippled back then and he was banished to the Cold Palace. The scene of him signing in for the first time in front of the Cold Palace and receiving the ultimate heaven-slashing sword skill as a reward was still vivid in his mind. It felt as if it happened yesterday. But in reality, 80 years have passed since then. This body of his was already more than 100 years old. In these 80 years, Lin Jiufeng could be said to have endured solitude and became akin to that of a carp that leaped over a dragon's gate. Especially in the previous 20-plus years. He cultivated in the land of extreme negative energy where even sunlight couldn't reach. If it wasn't for the white cat accompanying him, Lin Jiufeng would definitely be very lonely. Fortunately, the white cat was with him. Hence, Lin Jiufeng gave the white cat all the pills and treasures that he received from signing in. The white cat's cultivation was now at the peak of the Grotto Heaven realm. She was just one step away from the Supremacy realm. After entering the Grotto Heaven realm, Lin Jiufeng helped it refine the divine-grade Grotto Heaven into her very own Grotto Heaven. The white cat's potential and talent greatly improved because of this. The current white cat could now easily kill an expert of the same level with a swipe of its paw. She followed Lin Jiufeng and learned many of his cultivation techniques too. Meow. With a soft meow, the white cat jumped into Lin Jiufeng's arms. She laid comfortably and asked, "What are you thinking about?" "More than 20 years have passed since we came here and secluded ourselves. I couldn't help but wonder how the outside world is now." Lin Jiufeng answered honestly. "Do you want to go out?" The white cat looked at Lin Jiufeng in surprise. She thought that Lin Jiufeng would continue to stay here. In any case, she really liked this place. Although the place was dark and the atmosphere was conducive to sadness, she was alone with Lin Jiufeng in this place. It was a world where no one bothered them and the white cat was very satisfied with it. She could enjoy Lin Jiufeng's love on her own. Is the Yuhua God Dynasty still okay after all these years? Lin Jiufeng asked. Although he gave them the war machine wasn't omnipotent. A single war machine couldn't possibly suppress the world for so long. Furthermore, the Yuhua God Dynasty didn't have many powerhouses to help them. Lin Jiufeng reckoned that it would probably be difficult for the Yuhua God Dynasty to defend their territories against their enemies. Therefore, Lin Jiufeng wouldn't be surprised if he really went out and saw the Unrivalled God Dynasty in ruins, saw the birth of a new dynasty, or saw the world in chaos. Lin Jiufeng was already prepared for the worst. As for what Emperor De said about protecting the Unrivalled God Dynasty, to be honest, Lin Jiufeng couldn't believe him at all. Because in the current world, Emperor De didn't have the final say. There were too many powerhouses around, he wouldn't be able to defy their will on his own. Chapter 126, Beautiful Painting. What would the outside world look like 20 years later? Lin Jiufeng had no idea. But he was looking forward to it. Even if I continue to cultivate here in seclusion, my progress won't be that great anymore. I've signed in so many times and received so many rewards in the land of extreme negative energy that there's nothing here for me to sign in for anymore. Lin Jiufeng knew that it was time for him to go out and take a look at the world outside. More than 20 years have passed since he entered seclusion. It was enough time to foster a new generation of adults. Even Emperor De was almost 50 years old by now. Time surely was fast and ruthless to anyone. Little cat, let's go out. Lin Jiufeng got up and carried the white cat. He walked out of the land of extreme negative energy. The white cat didn't object. Although she enjoyed being alone with Lin Jiufeng and taking all of his attention for her own, she still wanted to learn more about the world outside. And also, as long as she was with Lin Jiufeng, she could go anywhere she wanted. Meow. The white cat called out gently. She jumped onto Lin Jiufeng's shoulder and laid down. Lin Jiufeng smiled and left the land of extreme negative energy with the white cat. Over the years, no other soul had ventured into the land of extreme negative energy. From this, it was obvious that his cold palace was still undiscovered and safe. And this also meant that the imperial capital was relatively stable today. Lin Jiufeng walked out of the land of extreme negative energy and came out of the underground passageway. The light that met his face made Lin Jiufeng and the white cat squint their eyes together. After living in the land of extreme negative energy deep underground for more than 20 years, their eyes had gotten used to the darkness. Now that they were out to receive sunlight, it felt scorching to their eyes. Lin Jiufeng closed his eyes and waited for a while. When the exhaustion in their eyes disappeared, only then did Lin Jiufeng and the white cat open their eyes once more. Everything was covered in dust. The walls that once existed had collapsed. The once empty and tidy area was now overgrown with weeds that had become as tall as a human being. The 2 cherry trees that Lin Jiufeng planted with his own hands have also been eroded by worms. The walls naturally collapsed, and the weeds tenaciously took over the ground. The once beautiful cherry trees that represented Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming only had their trunks, but the trunks had no life in them. If someone else were to describe this scene with a sentence, it was a scene of desolation. The place was even more dilapidated than when Lin Jiufeng first entered the cold palace. Lin Jiufeng watched silently as he lamented in his heart. Time really is a terrifying existence. He brought the white cat into the courtyard that he had cleaned up back then. The walls of the courtyard had long collapsed, and the stones had naturally weathered. A parasol tree tenaciously grew from the walls, causing the walls to collapse. Even the frost jade bed where Lin Jiufeng and the white cat used to sleep together had become a gray stone. It had long lost its power. Time had also been ruthless to the frost jade bed. Lin Jiufeng stood in the weeds that were as tall as him. He raised his hand, wanting to uproot them. But after a while, his raised hand dropped back down. This place had stayed empty for 20 years. Without upkeep, the courtyards naturally declined. The plants have all grown quite well, so why should I destroy them? Lin Jiufeng laughed at himself. It was because he was no longer around that the weeds and trees had a chance to grow. Now that he returned, he immediately wanted to eliminate them. Did that mean that he was going to continue staying here in the future? Lin Jiufeng took a few steps back. Looking at the wasteland-like grassland around him, he turned around and left. You're not staying here anymore? The white cat asked. No. This is already their home. Let's not join in the fun, Lin Jiufeng replied. I've lived here for 80 years. It's time for me to take a look at the world outside. Lin Jiufeng added rather casually. Back then, he didn't want to come out because he felt that he wasn't that powerful yet. In addition, various powerhouses had also emerged from their slumbers upon the start of the brand new era. These were the reasons why Lin Jiufeng thought that it was better for him to continue his daily routine in the cold palace and slowly improve his strength that way. But it was different now. Having exhausted the signed-in attempts in the cold palace, it had become useless to him. From the cold palace to the chasing corpse sect, from the chasing corpse sect to the demon lord, from the demon lord to the demon's den, then from the demon lord to the land of extreme negative energy. After 80 years, the cold palace could no longer provide him what he desired. Thus, Lin Jiufeng longed to go out and see the world outside. "I'll follow you, anywhere is fine," the white cat said softly. She didn't feel attached to the cold palace anymore. She grew to rely on Lin Jiufeng. After almost 30 years since he last went out, Lin Jiufeng finally came out of the cold palace with the white cat. Boom! Walking out of the door of the cold palace, without the light of the homes, to it, the spiritual energy of the outside world frantically surged into Lin Jiufeng's body. Lin Jiufeng's terrifying domain started absorbing the spiritual energy in the air. It had become like a huge vortex in the ocean, devouring boundless amounts of spiritual energy every second. Compared to more than 20 years ago, the amount of spiritual energy in the air has truly become rather phenomenal. Lin Jiufeng lamented. The concentration of spiritual energy had become 100 times higher than when Lin Jiufeng went into seclusion 20 years ago. It was at least 100 times more concentrated. Such copious spiritual energy was present in every corner of the current world. Lin Jiufeng wouldn't be surprised if he encountered many powerhouses on his journey this time around the world. With such an abundance of spiritual energy, the birth of a powerhouse was bound to become daily occurrences. The curtain of this brand new era has already been drawn. The countless hidden existences, waiting for this opportunity, are about to start their own ambitions in the world. Lin Jiufeng walked out of the cold palace with a tinge of emotion on his face. Light of the homes was still hanging in front of the cold palace, its flame flickering ever so slightly. Lin Jiufeng didn't remove it. It served as a seal of the land of extreme energy. In addition, it could also force future explorers to retreat. Lin Jiufeng had no use for it at all. It was much more useful for it to be placed in the cold palace, so it could continue to hide the location of the land of extreme negative energy from the outside world. Walking out of the cold palace, Lin Jiufeng saw a bustling imperial capital. This was unlike Lin Jiufeng's expectations. Not only was the Xuanhuang God Dynasty not wiped out, but it also developed very well. The Xuanhuang God Dynasty had experienced many developmental breakthroughs for the past 20 years. The imperial capital itself had expanded its territory a few times. It became bigger and bigger. It even had the Zenith Heaven Path Sex Mountain in its territory today. The streets were densely packed with people. There were stall owners shouting along the streets. There were also hawkers and ambulant vendors carrying their goods while walking through the streets as they advertised their merchandise, snacks, and souvenirs. There were young masters and young mistresses with picturesque looks. There were scholars and martial artists that were in high spirits. There were Taoist priests and monks arguing with each other as usual. There were government officials patrolling the streets, ensuring the safety of everyone. Martial sages were everywhere. The young monks were martial sages, the young Taoist priests were martial sages, the patrolling officials were martial sages, and the quiet young ladies were also martial sages. The path of cultivation had become common practice as cabbages in the streets. Lin Jiufeng walked away from the cold palace. As soon as he laid eyes on this scene, his heart immediately relaxed. What a beautiful painting of the world! What a beautiful painting of the mortal realm! What a magnificent dynasty! Lin Jiufeng didn't need to ask anything. He could tell from the energetic looks on the young scholars, the young martial artists, and the young ladies' faces that this was a prosperous era. Lin Jiufeng carried the white cat as he walked on the streets. He saw manservants, carriage drivers, and porters. Each one of them looked energetic as they went about their day. Emperor De managed to turn the Xuanhuang God Dynasty for the better to this extent? Lin Jiufeng was impressed. He had expected the disappearance of the Yuhua God Dynasty 20 years ago. He truly did not expect that instead of being wiped out, the recovery of the world's spiritual energy only served to further bolster the dynasty's development. Lin Jiufeng suddenly wanted to know how Emperor De managed the Yuhua God Dynasty all these years. Moreover, how did he handle his enemies, the sects? Chapter 127, 30 Years of Change, 1. Walking along the streets, what he saw and heard greatly surprised Lin Jiufeng. Everyone he met was positive towards life and was full of confidence in themselves. Lin Jiufeng was really curious. How exactly did Emperor De manage this dynasty? The wet markets in the imperial capital were divided into the eastern and western markets. It was located in two directions and had a wide range of coverage. There were various shops, restaurants, teahouses, brothels, and so on. Lin Jiufeng followed the crowd and walked into the eastern market. In the biggest restaurant here, Lin Jiufeng saw customers exchanging toasts with each other. There was also a storyteller, a distinguished official, a literary scholar, a Taoist priest, and so on. There was an endless stream of customers in the 9-story restaurant. Waiters shuttled back and forth inside, looking extremely busy. Lin Jiufeng came in and asked for a seat by the window. Then, he rejected the request of sharing a table. He ordered a dozen delicious dishes and a jar of good wine. The waiter immediately arranged for the dishes to be served. Lin Jiufeng placed the white cat on the table. She took 2 elegant steps and stretched her body. Her snow-like fur was crystal clear, and her eyes that were filled with stars were even more attractive. 2 ladies in the restaurant couldn't take their eyes off the white cat when they saw this scene. They even came over to play with the white cat. But the white cat rejected them in an extremely aloof manner. Her attitude was arrogant and she completely ignored anyone else other than Lin Jiufeng. Lin Jiufeng just smiled. He apologized to the 2 ladies and reached out to stroke the white cat. Meow. The white cat called out lazily. She licked Lin Jiufeng's palm and rubbed against it affectionately. The 2 ladies became so envious that their eyes turned red. Lin Jiufeng ignored them. While he was waiting for the delicacies, he saw that the storyteller old man had already stopped to rest. Lin Jiufeng's eyes lit up. He said, "Old man, do you mind having a drink?" His voice echoed inconspicuously in the noisy restaurant. Even the customers sitting closest to Lin Jiufeng didn't hear him speak. But the storyteller, who was very far away, heard his voice. He looked over and saw Lin Jiufeng. The latter wore a smile on his face. He looked calm and elegant, like a dashing young man inundated with a spring breeze. Although the storyteller's cultivation wasn't high, he was knowledgeable and knew that Lin Jiufeng wasn't just a simple young man. Lin Jiufeng had invited him to a drink so politely. He was just a storyteller, there was nothing on him that was worthy of Lin Jiufeng's attention. Hence, he put down the things in his hands and walked over. "Guest, what do you want to ask?" The storyteller knew that his only advantage was that he knew a lot of things. He was also smart enough to ask the moment he approached. "Let's talk while drinking." Lin Jiufeng extended his hand and invited the storyteller to sit down. It just so happened that the waiter brought over the food and wine he ordered. Lin Jiufeng poured a cup of wine for the storyteller and asked, "How much do you know about the recent events of the Yuhua God Dynasty in the past 30 years? The storyteller took the wine glass respectfully and replied humbly, "I don't dare to say that I know a lot, but as long as it's something that the general public knows, I know it too. But I also know a few things that the general public do not know." Lin Jiufeng was satisfied with his answer. Thus, he asked, "Can you tell me more about the major events that happened in the past few years?" The storyteller thought about it carefully and said, "There were many major events. For example, the establishment of the martial temples, the Zenith Heaven Path sect donating all of their cultivation techniques and secret manuals to these martial temples, and the assassination attempt of the 8 great demonic sects against Princess Yulin. Princess Yulin fought a bloody battle that lasted over 80,000 miles. She made a breakthrough by the riverbanks of the Wei River with a stroke of her sword. Upon becoming a supremacy, she managed to escape." When Lin Jiufeng heard this, he raised his wine cup and asked, "Martial temples? Princess Yulin fought a bloody battle for 80,000 miles? The storyteller nodded. Can you see the two girls over there? Lin Jiufeng nodded. They were the ones who came to greet the white cat just now. They are students from the main branch of the martial temple. They are already so powerful despite being so young. Once they've graduated from the martial temple, their contributions to the God Dynasty are bound to be great, the storyteller replied. The very first martial temple was built by Emperor De, 20 years ago. He focused most of the Yuhua God Dynasty's resources on building these martial temples and even ordered powerhouses to teach and nurture the next generation. Emperor De even placed the royal library into the martial temple and opened branches of it on a large scale. With the very first martial temple as the prime example, branches of the martial temple were also built on provinces and rural villages. As long as you are young and you want to cultivate, you can become a student of a martial temple to learn. These martial temples have been around for over 20 years now, and it has nurtured countless geniuses for the Yuhua God Dynasty. They are now the cornerstones of the dynasty itself. When the storyteller was done, his face became full of pride. He cupped his hands in the direction of the Forbidden City as a sign of respect to the ruler. Back then, Emperor De ignored every resistance and forced the construction of these martial temples. With the help of the court officials, he suppressed the aristocratic families and firmly established the very first martial temple along with its branches. Once the martial temple was established, it became free of charge for all to enter and learn. The pressure on the state treasury had become rather large. There were many mocking voices among the ranks of the aristocratic families, sects, and even from the imperial court. But Emperor De didn't say a word. He silently persevered for a few years. Then, an explosion in the number of geniuses blossomed. Countless geniuses appeared in the martial temples, one after another. Their presence relieved the pressure on Emperor De. Lin Jiufeng listened with a smile on his face. He was truly praising Emperor De's methods and ways of handling the dynasty in his heart. Then what happened to Princess Yulin? Lin Jiufeng asked. The chase was caused by a monk who went around harming women, causing widespread havoc and indignation. As a response, Princess Yulin chased after him for 8 days and 8 nights before finally decapitating him. However, the demonic sects caught wind of this chase and set up an ambush for Princess Yulin. With that, another chase began. This time, it lasted for 80,000 miles. In the end, Princess Yulin escaped to Wei River. Fortunately, an epiphany came upon her and she unsheathed her sword to unleash a move that allowed her to make a breakthrough into the supremacy realm. With her breakthrough, she managed to escape. Lin Jiufeng asked, what happened after that? Afterwards, the demonic sects were suppressed by the war machine sent by Emperor De. As a result, the demonic sects directly declined to obscurity, the storyteller replied with a bragging look. The war machine appeared? Lin Jiufeng raised his brows. The war machine protected the Yuhua God Dynasty all these years and has helped our dynasty against many dangers. But with the increasing number of powerhouses in recent years, the war machine has started to become less effective. The storyteller sighed. Less effective? Lin Jiufeng looked at the storyteller in surprise. Last year, a swordsman from overseas delivered a heavy blow to the Yuhua God Dynasty. The war machine didn't manage to stop him, the storyteller replied. An overseas swordsman gave the Yuhua God Dynasty a heavy blow? Lin Jiufeng was puzzled. What heavy blow? Was it defeating the war machine? An overseas swordsman challenged Princess Yulin to a duel close to the sea. After 3 moves, Princess Yulin was suppressed, the storyteller replied softly. Princess Yulin was suppressed? Lin Jiufeng's eyes narrowed. Yes. After that swordsman defeated Princess Yulin, he didn't kill her. He only suppressed Princess Yulin. Then, he came to the imperial capital and asked Emperor De to give up the imperial capital in exchange for Princess Yulin's life. The storyteller added. What happened then? Lin Jiufeng asked. The war machine made its move. But the seemingly omnipotent war machine only managed to tie with that swordsman. He managed to stop the swordsman, but he also couldn't rescue Princess Yulin. It has been a year since that swordsman built a thatched hut by the sea. He said that he wanted to practice his swordsmanship first and that he would come to snatch the imperial capital of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty next year. The storyteller looked aggrieved. Chapter 128, 30 Years of Change, 2. An overseas swordsman challenged Princess Yulin. In 3 moves, Princess Yulin was defeated. But that swordsman didn't kill her, he only suppressed her in a show of force. The target of that swordsman was the imperial capital of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. He asked Emperor De to move the capital elsewhere so he could take over the land. Emperor De was enraged. He ordered the war machine to act, but the war machine only managed to tie with the swordsman. Fortunately, the war machine also forced the latter away from the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. And the swordsman didn't insist on barging in. He announced that he would come to the imperial capital next year. Then, a scout found out that the swordsman had built a thatched hut by the sea, not far from the place where Princess Yulin was being suppressed. Lin Jiufeng frowned slightly after hearing this. He didn't expect that while nothing happened to the Xuanhuang God Dynasty, Princess Yulin fell into a predicament and was currently held captive. What's the background of that swordsman? To think that he could draw with that war machine, Lin Jiufeng was rather curious. According to him, he's the successor of some millennium sword god in the olden days. He said that his father's corpse was beneath the imperial capital, so he wanted the imperial capital and the people of our Xuanhuang God Dynasty to move away from his father's tomb, the storyteller replied indignantly. Since his father was buried underground, he should dig his father's corpse out himself. Why must he force everyone in the capital to move away? A millennium sword god in the olden days, Lin Jiufeng muttered. He could still remember how he encountered the tomb of the Millennium Sword God more than 30 years ago when he just started signing in at the land of extreme negative energy. It was there where he received the Millennium Sword God's ultimate technique as a reward for signing in. The Flying Sword Technique. The Millennium Sword God died in the land of extreme negative energy. Lin Jiufeng didn't expect that his son would actually come looking for him after all these years. An entire era had to pass before his son came to look for him. It was rather surreal. Other than this, did anything else happen in the Xuanhuang God Dynasty? Lin Jiufeng asked. Since Princess Yulin was only being held captive, Lin Jiufeng was not in a hurry. It has been almost a year since she was held captive by that swordsman. The months that passed since then must have been a great tempering to her mind as she endured captivity. Lin Jiufeng wanted to understand more about this world first before doing anything else. There are many major events. For example, the formation of the Great Tao sects, and the awakening of the Xuanhuang sect's Venerable Yushu. When Venerable Yushu woke up from his slumber, the first thing he did was to ask Emperor De to pay a visit to the Taoist saint, the storyteller replied. We all know what he's thinking. Isn't it because he wants to control the Xuanhuang God Dynasty? Or maybe he wants the Xuanhuang God Dynasty to establish the Xuanhuang sect as the dynasty's state religion and help them spread their beliefs throughout the world? A fight also happened between the Tiandu sect and the Xuanhuang sect. Apparently, the former had occupied the ruins of the Xuanhuang sect. As both prestigious sects of yore, the Xuanhuang sect needed a reason to justify their move against the Tiandu sect. Thus, they went to look for Emperor Di and asked him to confer upon them the title of being the dynasty's state religion. This way, they could legitimately force the Tiandu sect out of where their sect once stood. The storyteller said in a low voice. Perhaps it was because he had drunk some wine, but he became bolder in his words. He said a few things that he didn't even dare to talk out loud before. Lin Jiufeng continued to pour wine for him and asked, just now, you said that this Xuanhuang sect is one of the great Tao sects. What are the great Tao sects? Lin Jiufeng truly was ignorant about how the Taoist sects of the world operated. Great Tao sect. The name of this category alone sure was imposing. I heard it from others, but I'm not sure if it's true or not, the storyteller spoke in advance before continuing. Great Tao sects are the sects that once produced immortals. After the Xuanhuang sect emerged, many people started to spread the news about the Xuanhuang sect's emergence into the world. They managed to produce an immortal in the previous era and they are recognized as the leader of the Taoist sections. With their fame, strength, and foundation combined, they are a little overbearing in their actions. The matters of the previous era had already become an open secret. Most cultivators already knew about the existence of those sects of yore. I see. Lin Jiufeng suddenly understood. An immortal. Being an immortal was one of his goals. Wasn't the reason why he stayed in the land of extreme negative energy for so long was to get closer to this goal? What did Emperor De say in return? Lin Jiufeng continued to ask. Naturally, Emperor De didn't agree. He explained to the public that he is a devout Buddhist. If he were to pay his respects, he would definitely be going to the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower of the Buddhist sects instead. The storyteller chuckled before continuing. Emperor De's words have angered the Xuanhuang sect quite a lot, but it has made the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower very happy. They took the initiative to enter the fray and interfere. They said that when Emperor De is done with his work, he can come to the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower to offer incense and pray to Buddha. They said that Buddha will also protect the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. Perhaps it was because of the wine that Lin Jiufeng ordered, but the storyteller had become more talkative than usual. The effect of the wine was quite strong. The storyteller's face turned slightly red. He became engrossed in his talk and couldn't stop. Emperor De's plan was very clever. Facing the oppression of the Xuanhuang sect, he shifted the trouble away with a simple sentence. He also dragged the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower that isn't inferior to the Xuanhuang sect into the fray, forcing the Buddhist and the Taoist sects to fight against each other. Emperor De didn't say anything after that, but the seed of conflict between the Xuanhuang sect and the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower can be considered to have already been planted by Emperor De. The storyteller couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration. He had analyzed Emperor De's thoughts very clearly, that was why he was so surprised. Facing the Xuanhuang sect, which was a great Tao sect, Emperor De didn't panic. Instead, he used a move to divert the trouble away from himself. He was indeed worthy of being the emperor who had governed the Xuanhuang God Dynasty for decades. Everything seemed to be so simple in his hands, yet if one looked closely at his moves, they would find that all of them were done rather intelligently and well. Lin Jiufeng couldn't help but nod as he listened. Emperor De's tactics were becoming increasingly outstanding. What kind of Buddhist sect is the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower? Lin Jiufeng asked curiously. Before he went into seclusion, this sect was still absent. Weren't there only 3 Buddhist sects in the current era? Shaolin Temple, Xuanhuang Temple, and Dalan Temple. Among them, Shaolin Temple and Xuanhuang Temple had been suppressed by Lin Jiufeng's paintings. Tens and thousands of their temples had also been demolished. What was the background of this 10,000 Buddha sacred tower? The 10,000 Buddha sacred tower is a Buddhist holy land of the previous era. They have a huge pagoda that is said to contain the golden body of an arhat, as well as sariras. They have also produced immortals in the past, and they are not inferior to the Xuanhuang sect at all. Even both Shaolin and Xuanhuang Temple have joined the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower as their subordinates. It would surely be a fascinating sight to see them go against the Xuanhuang sect, the storyteller explained. Which major sects are there in the world today? Lin Jiufeng asked curiously. He discovered that he seemed to have spent thousands of years in seclusion. There were things and sects everywhere that he didn't understand nor know. The changes that the rapid recovery of the world's spiritual energy had brought into this world were now showing their massive effects. Lin Jiufeng had disappeared for nearly 30 years, so he was naturally incompatible with this world after spending such a long time in seclusion. There are many top sects in the current cultivation world. Some famous ones are the Xuanhuang sect, the 10,000 Buddha sacred tower, and the 6 paths of reincarnation of the demon path. There's also the Essence Chi sect of the plains, the 7 great sages of the demon and monster race, and the peerless demons in the Hangwan mountain range. Each of them are terrifying, to say the least. Then there's that swordsman overseas, the Robe Cultivator Alliance, and the 3 immortal mountains overseas, Penglai, Fangzheng, and Yingzhou. In addition, I also heard that a major sect has recently appeared in the Shu Mountains. They are called the Shu Mountain Sword Sect. It's just that they are very low-key in his world. These are just the major sects that a slightly well-informed old man like me knows about. There are also others that I don't know. For example, I've been asking around about the Temple of Gods in the Wildlands, but no one knows about it. The Temple of Gods is simply too mysterious. The storyteller shared everything in one go, causing Lin Jiufeng to fall into a daze. It turned out that this world had already become this terrifying. But immediately afterwards, Lin Jiufeng's blood boiled. Only in such a world would it not be in vain for him to improve himself. So many large sects have popped up, their appearance surely brought with them mysterious and mystical places in the age of yore. I can go and visit those places to sign in before them one by one. Doing this, I can also fight against the powerhouses of the previous era along the way. Lin Jiufeng's eyes looked radiant. They seemed to contain the sun, moon, mountains, rivers, and the entire world itself within. Chapter 129, War God Catalog. The storyteller spoke a lot, and the amount of wine he drank increased the more words he said. In the end, he told Lin Jiufeng everything he knew. It didn't matter whether it was true or false. Both the White Cat and Lin Jiufeng quietly listened. They watched as the storyteller collapsed on the table and fell into a deep sleep. With a flick of his finger, a stream of true qi entered the storyteller's body and it circulated around his body. The stream of true qi soothed the storyteller's exhaustion from drinking and the hidden injuries in his body. It was Lin Jiufeng's reward to him. Let's go. I know a lot about this world now in its current state. It seems that going here to drink has been a worthwhile endeavor to me. Lin Jiufeng picked up his wine cup and drank it in one gulp and said with a smile. The storyteller's knowledge was definitely inaccurate in some parts because he had only learned them from rumors. It was impossible for everything that was passed down by word of mouth to be true. But Lin Jiufeng still managed to roughly understand the current situation of the world after the cup of wine. Next, he had to find the answers by himself and take a good look at this world along the way. As for the matter of Princess Yulin being held captive, he had to resolve it no matter what. The son of the Millennium Sword God from the previous era should be visiting the capital soon, right? Lin Jiufeng suddenly felt that this world was full of exciting endeavors and people. Especially Emperor Day. Lin Jiufeng was truly impressed by him. Meow, where are you going? The White Cat jumped into Lin Jiufeng's arms and asked. Let's go to the Forbidden City and take a look at my descendant, Lin Jiufeng replied. Lin Jiufeng called for a waiter to settle the bill for the food and wine. Then, he left with the White Cat. The two girls from the martial temple looked at the White Cat longingly. They were extremely envious of Lin Jiufeng. They were envious that he actually had such an indescribably beautiful cat. In fact, they even wanted to chase after him, but it was a pity that Lin Jiufeng's movement technique was simply too formidable. They only saw Lin Jiufeng leave the restaurant and enter the crowd. Afterwards, they couldn't find him anymore. Sigh. The two girls sighed ruefully. They looked at the delicious dishes on the table and suddenly felt that they weren't that delicious anymore. Forbidden City. The Yuhua God Dynasty was established hundreds of years ago. The founding emperor wanted to build a huge palace. Subsequently, Phoebe Zenons with diameters of nearly 2 meters were transported from Sichuan. Along with it were the gold bricks from Suzhou, the clay tiles from Linqing, the white marbles from Fangshan, and the granite from Xuyang. He gathered the essence of the four directions and the work of tens of thousands of craftsmen. In the end, the world's largest palace complex was created. The Forbidden City. To this day, the Forbidden City still remained in existence after hundreds of years. In this world where spiritual energy was abundant and powerhouses constantly appeared, the Forbidden City remained standing tall and towering. The previous emperors of the Yuhua God Dynasty lived in the Forbidden City. They measured the ground beneath their feet, observed the stars above their heads, and carefully counted the time before their eyes. Only an emperor who ensured the stability and prosperity of the people of the world deserved to own this city. Without a doubt, the recent 3 generations of emperors had achieved this. Emperor Yuan was a disruptor of order. He firmly pushed forward reforms amidst a declining dynasty, severing the shackles of the old era and opening the doors into the new era. Coincidentally, the recovery of the world's spiritual energy happened at the same time as Emperor Yuan's reforms were being pushed forwards. When it came to Emperor Ming, he was the successor to the reforms. He was the successor to Emperor Yuan's will. He became the bridge between Emperor Yuan's work and Emperor De's. He inherited Emperor Yuan's career and laid a solid foundation for Emperor De. When it was Emperor De's turn, there was no longer a need for large reforms in the Yuhua God Dynasty. What he needed to do was to face a complicated and dangerous, vast world in the middle of its spiritual energy recovery. Countless powerhouses were bound to appear and countless terrifying existences were bound to awaken. The most powerful among them could even destroy the Yuhua God Dynasty with a flick of their fingers. Under such great pressure, Emperor De remained firm in his decision to implement laws and establish decorum that was beneficial to the people and the Yuhua God Dynasty. This was an ancient palace that was used to seeing the most beautiful and ugly people in the world. It witnessed how Emperor De changed from a high-spirited youth to a middle-aged uncle. Lin Jiufeng walked into the Forbidden City through the main gate. No one discovered his presence. The guards who brushed past him turned a blind eye to him. This wasn't the guards' fault. If Lin Jiufeng didn't want anyone to see him, then no one would be able to. Just like the current Emperor De. He was reviewing the memorials in the Great Council Hall. The pile of memorials that had become as tall as a person was continuously being revised by him. 15 minutes later, another batch of memorials replaced the previous stack. The young eunuchs were busy traveling back and forth. There were no small matters for the matters of a dynasty. Emperor De inherited the drive of Emperor Ming and Emperor Yuan. He was very serious about revising the memorials. Lin Jiufeng didn't go in. He stood outside the Great Council Hall, enjoying the sight of Emperor De reviewing the memorials. Lin Jiufeng was very satisfied with his current appearance. He was carrying the responsibility that belonged to him. Being in a position that everyone envied, it was akin to walking on thin ice because he carried the expectations of the entire Yuhua God Dynasty. A few minutes later, Lin Jiufeng turned around and left. "Aren't you going to meet him?" the White Cat asked curiously. She thought that Lin Jiufeng came to the Forbidden City to meet with Emperor De and give him pointers. But Lin Jiufeng only looked at him for a few minutes before he turned around and left. "He's already adapted to the days without my help, why should I appear again?" Lin Jiufeng asked. Under Emperor De's leadership, the Yuhua God Dynasty managed to maintain itself well in this chaotic world. He did a good job. Lin Jiufeng couldn't find any fault with him. Since that was the case, he would let Emperor De continue what he was doing according to his own ways. Lin Jiufeng planned to just stay in the dark and continue his daily routine in peace. Wouldn't it be enough if he just helped out along the way? Why was there a need for them to meet? The White Cat meowed. Since Lin Jiufeng didn't want to meet him, then so be it. Lin Jiufeng left the Great Council Hall and went to the Empress Dowager's palace. In the huge Forbidden City, Lin Jiufeng only knew 3 people. Empress De, Princess Yulin, and the Empress Dowager. Among them, the Empress Dowager was the first to know him, but she had the least interaction with him among the 3. Before Emperor Ming died, he treated Lin Jiufeng as his trump card and placed this trump card in the hands of the Empress Dowager, telling her to look for Lin Jiufeng for help if she needed anything. Lin Jiufeng agreed to Emperor Ming's request. After being in seclusion for so long, the Empress Dowager must have looked for him during this period of time. He felt sorry to Emperor Ming for not helping her out. Hence, Lin Jiufeng decided to go and see if this Empress Dowager needed his help. Upon entering the Empress Dowager's palace, Lin Jiufeng found that she was already asleep. 30 years ago, she was still in her prime. 30 years later, she also aged a little. Although she was skilled in preserving her looks and had a lot of resources to help her do so. But her cultivation base wasn't that strong. She was already in her 60s and she still looked to be in her 30s or 40s. But the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes were obvious. Lin Jiufeng didn't enter her room. He stood outside the Empress Dowager's palace and watched her sleep quietly. Her body is healthy, that's all that matters. Lin Jiufeng gave her a simple checkup before turning around to leave. Sign in the Empress Dowager's palace? But when he turned around, a line of words appeared before his eyes. Sign in. Lin Jiufeng finally remembered that he had never been here before. Empress Dowager's palace. Back then, Lin Jiufeng had only visited the Empress Palace, not the Empress Dowager's. Sign-in successful. Received War God Catalog. A peerless cultivation technique entered Lin Jiufeng's mind. He instantly understood how it worked. This cultivation technique isn't bad. It's suitable to be my trump card. Lin Jiufeng was satisfied. After comprehending the War God Catalog, he didn't stop moving. He directly left the Empress Dowager's palace. Yulin, the sleeping Empress Dowager, suddenly shouted. She woke up and looked around frantically. But looking at the empty palace, the Empress Dowager sighed forlornly. Lin Jiufeng turned his head and saw this scene. Chapter 130, Phenomenon Domain. Seeing the Empress Dowager calling out to Princess Yulin in her dreams and waking up in disappointment and sadness. Lin Jiufeng pondered for a while. Princess Yulin had lost to the son of the Millennium Sword God and was held captive near the coast. Since the overseas swordsman still had to use her as a tool in the negotiations, Lin Jiufeng reckoned that she was safe. But as a mother, the Empress Dowager couldn't help but worry day and night. Coincidentally, Emperor De had just finished reviewing the memorials. He was a little tired, but he still came to see his mother. Emperor De hadn't come alone. He had brought his empress with him. Unlike his old man, Emperor Ming, whose relationship with his wife didn't go so well until the later phase of his life, Emperor De's relationship with his wife was smooth sailing. Emperor Ming married a woman he didn't like. Thus, he had to spend more than a decade just to learn how to love someone whom he didn't like in the first place. After the reforms were passed, his mind wandered. He wanted to find his true love. However, he was tricked by the mountain ghost race and almost lost his life. After that, he gave up on finding true love and slowly interacted with and got to know the current Empress Dowager better. However, even until Emperor Ming's death, no one could say for sure whether he had fallen in love with the Empress Dowager or not. But one thing was for sure, he had definitely approved of the Empress Dowager and gave her his greatest trump card. Having learned her lesson from Emperor Ming, the Empress Dowager was much more lenient with the emperor. He gave him free rein when it came to the person whom he wanted to marry. But of course, as his mother, she still made sure that the woman he chose was suitable to be the empress of a god dynasty. When she became satisfied with his partner, Emperor De and his wife became officially engaged in marriage, and the girl Emperor De very much liked became a resident of the Forbidden City and a member of the palace. Their relationship remained harmonious throughout the years. Emperor De never chose a concubine. In the huge imperial harem, only the empress existed. This was unprecedented throughout the history of the dynasty. Even when the empress advised him to take a concubine, Emperor De shook his head and refused. Emperor De and the empress also had 2 children who were already adults and were now working hard to learn the ways of their father and mother. Because Emperor De only loved a single person and didn't marry anyone else, he was praised by countless women. Today, both Emperor De and the empress visited the Empress Dowager. After decades, both of them were still very close to each other. They held hands as they walked and enjoyed each other's company. The palace maids and eunuchs waiting on him were envious of their display of affection. Many people passed by Lin Jiufeng, but no one noticed his presence. The empress said gently, "Your Majesty's busy with the state affairs, you have just finished reviewing the memorials. You should go and rest. I will visit mother for both of us every day." Emperor De sighed and replied, "After Yulin was held captive, mother washed her face with tears every day. Mother misses Yulin very much, but she didn't tell me even once. I know that she didn't want to disturb me while I am dealing with state affairs, but the imperial physicians told me that mother is suffering from insomnia every day. As her son, how could I not come and take a look at her?" "Your Majesty, is there really no way to save Sister Yulin?" the empress asked. "That swordsman is very strong. Even the war machine can't defeat him. If we want to save Yulin, we have to hand over the capital. But once we do that, the dignity of the dynasty that I have painstakingly maintained for all these years will disappear. Those packs of ferocious wolves, also known as our enemies, will immediately swarm over us and tear our Yuhua God dynasty apart before swallowing it in one gulp," Emperor De said in a deep voice. How could he not want to save his only sister? But he didn't dare to. the Empress stopped talking. She trusted her husband when it came to such a major state affair. He could handle it well. For decades, she had never interfered in state affairs. This was also the reason she was praised by the court as being a virtuous empress. Lin Jiufeng watched as they entered the Empress Dowager's palace and turned around to leave. Little cat. In the 80 years since I came to this world, I have never looked at the sea. Do you know what the sea looks like? Lin Jiufeng asked. I don't know. I have also never looked at the sea, the white cat shook her head. She had never once laid her eyes on the sea in her entire life. If that's the case, let's go and take a look, replied Lin Jiufeng with a smile. The white cat looked at Lin Jiufeng and snorted. You just want to save Princess Yulin, right? You're only taking me to see the sea because it's convenient. Wrong. I have always wanted to bring you to the sea. But since we're going there anyway, I should also save Princess Yulin. Lin Jiufeng corrected. Although the white cat knew that Lin Jiufeng was merely coaxing her, she was still very happy. She squinted her eyes and meowed adorably. After leaving the Forbidden City, Lin Jiufeng walked out of the imperial capital. The golden age of this era had already begun. Even the Taoist and Buddhist sects that had once produced immortals had also emerged from their hibernation. From this alone, one could see that the golden age of this era had already begun. This was the first time Lin Jiufeng left the imperial capital with the intention to look at his surroundings seriously and carve the sceneries into his mind. Whenever Lin Jiufeng went out of the imperial capital back then, he never had a chance to enjoy the scenery for he had always been in a hurry. This time, however, he took the initiative to leave the capital. The scenery and the way of living that he saw were all very different from before. In the background of this era rich in spiritual energy, even the old man in the fields and the people in their 70s and 80s could walk at a fast pace. They could carry sacks of merchandise and food on their backs as if they were at their prime age. One could say that the golden age of an era was the best time to live. But it could also be the worst time to live. Lin Jiufeng and the white cat traveled for a day before they arrived on the closest shores of the sea. The imperial capital was quite distant from the sea. After all, it was located at the center of the Unrivalled God Dynasty whose territory protected it in all directions. But it was really distant from the sea. But to Lin Jiufeng, the distance was nothing. He took a step forward and miles were condensed into mere inches. Distance didn't exist to Lin Jiufeng. The sea. An endless expanse of blue waves splashed against the shore. Lin Jiufeng was looking at the sea for the first time in both his previous and current life. It was the same for the white cat. Both man and cat stood by the sea, enjoying the sea breeze that brushed past their figures. They looked at the blue sky and the white clouds. The sky was clear and boundless. Their mood greatly improved. The sea breeze brought with it the humidity of the sea. The white cat stuck out its pink tongue and licked the sea breeze in the air. It's salty, the white cat spat it out and said, feeling aggrieved. Lin Jiufeng looked at her embarrassed expression and laughed out loud. The white cat buried her face into Lin Jiufeng's neck and meowed. Lin Jiufeng smiled faintly as he admired the sea. He walked along the shore and observed the scenery around him quietly. Those who were seeing the sea for the first time would always have the desire to explore it. All of a sudden, a line of words appeared before Lin Jiufeng's eyes. Do you want to sign in before the sea? Lin Jiufeng's eyes lit up. He didn't expect that he could also sign in before the sea. Sign in. Lin Jiufeng agreed decisively. Sign in successful. Received Sea Rising Bright Moon Phenomenon Domain. Phenomenon Domain? Lin Jiufeng muttered in surprise. This was his first time receiving something like this. Closing his eyes, Lin Jiufeng felt that an extremely vast sea had appeared in his god's domain. A bright moon was slowly rising in the middle of the sea. Boom! Immediately afterwards, Lin Jiufeng realized that the might of his god's domain had increased by several folds. A phenomenon domain, is that terrifying? Lin Jiufeng was overjoyed. He then did his best to comprehend this phenomenon domain as fast as possible. Sea Rising Bright Moon. It was a terrifying phenomenon, even in the real world. Once integrated into one's original domain, their domain would then receive the support of the world itself. As a result, their domain would become infinitely powerful. Only a handful of people were destined to comprehend a phenomenon domain. But those that had phenomenon domains were monsters among monsters. They couldn't even be described as geniuses. It was more appropriate to describe them as freaks. This proved just how powerful a phenomenon domain was. Chapter 131, Seeing a World of Swords. Seeing the sea for the first time, Lin Jiufeng triggered the sign-in and received a phenomenon domain. All of a sudden, Lin Jiufeng's strength increased by a huge margin. He was overjoyed. With the integration of a phenomenon domain into his god's domain, its might had explosively increased. Once Lin Jiufeng thoroughly understood the sea rising bright moonlight phenomenon domain, he walked along the coastline to the place where Princess Yulin was being held captive. It has been a year since Princess Yulin was taken hostage. It wasn't difficult to find her at all, the surging sword energy was visible even from a great distance. Lin Jiufeng didn't even need to ask any third party as to where the overseas swordsman took root. As he stood by the sea, the spiritual energy in the air became like a tide, rising and falling. In the distance, soaring sword energy formed a beam that appeared in Lin Jiufeng's eyes. That was the place where Princess Yulin was being held captive. The overseas swordsman didn't even bother hiding. Anyone who was at the human god realm and came here could sense the overbearing sword energies. The son of the Millennium Sword God of the old era was arrogant. He didn't bother to hide anything. This was obviously his way of telling the Xuanhuang God Dynasty that the princess was here and there was nothing that they could do to release her until they agreed to his demands. And if they truly wanted to save her, they could just try and do it. But in the months that passed, the Xuanhuang God Dynasty didn't do anything at all. Lin Jiufeng looked at the soaring sword energy that filled the void. He walked over. He wanted to see what this son of the Millennium Sword God was up to. The bay used to be bustling with people from all walks of life enjoying themselves by the sea. The waves that constantly splashed over, the blue sky, and the white clouds all together formed a beautiful scenery. But since Princess Yulin was held captive by the bay, no one dared to visit the place anymore. Beneath the clear sky, the breeze was warm. It brought with it the salty smell of the sea. The bay that was miles long had no one on its hot sands. There were only the surging waves and a thatched hut. Lin Jiufeng walked over. In an instant, he saw the reason why Princess Yulin couldn't escape. In the sky above the bay, a huge sword array was pressing down on her. Resplendent and powerful sword energies constantly zigzagged in the air, forming sword energy veins that made up the array formation holding Princess Yulin captive. For the ordinary people, the bay was empty except for a thatched hut. But in Lin Jiufeng's eyes, there was sword energy everywhere within the void of this area. Its sharp killing intent was laid bare in his eyes. He reckoned that if someone was careless, the sword energy would directly slash out. They would find it hard to resist such an attack. The center of this sword formation was the thatched hut. The sword formation was being used to suppress Princess Yulin, who was being held captive by the sea. In Lin Jiufeng's eyes, he saw 365 sword energies directed at Princess Yulin beneath the chaos that these zigzagging sword energies made. Beams of sword energy sealed Princess Yulin's routes of escape, forcefully suppressing her by the sea. Lin Jiufeng walked along the edge of the sword formation and observed. He had studied array formations before. He wasn't a noob at array formations, so he could tell that the sword formation was a type of oppressive array formation. It didn't hurt Princess Yulin at all. Princess Yulin remained unscathed despite the suppression. Her eyes were closed as she hovered above the sword energies. Using the sword energies as a bed, she emptied her mind and floated in the air. As Lin Jiufeng was observing the sword array, the door to the thatched hut opened and a middle-aged man holding a wine pot walked out. He didn't notice Lin Jiufeng, who was outside the array formation. He walked to the edge of the sea and asked, "You still don't want to tell me where you've learned your flying sword technique from?" Lin Jiufeng watched silently. The middle-aged man was the son of the Millennium Sword God from the old era. He suppressed Princess Yulin but didn't kill her just yet because he wanted to figure out how Princess Yulin learned his father's flying sword technique as well as to use her as a bargaining tool against the dynasty. His words made Lin Jiufeng remember that he had once used Princess Yulin's sword when he killed 15 Supremacy Realm cultivators with a move before going into seclusion. He was also the one that imparted the flying sword technique to Princess Yulin back then. At that time, Lin Jiufeng let Princess Yulin comprehend it by herself. After all these years, Princess Yulin's understanding of the technique was already deep, to say the least. When she fought against the son of the Millennium Sword God, the latter immediately recognized the technique that she was using. What Princess Yulin displayed was his father's supreme sword skill. The flying sword technique. Hence, he went all out and defeated Princess Yulin with 3 strikes. Then, he captured and suppressed Princess Yulin here and began to inquire about the origins of her flying sword technique. He also wanted to learn it from her. Princess Yulin opened her eyes. Sword energy shot out from her pearl-like eyes. Boom! The waves rolled and swept, shaking the bay. Princess Yulin didn't answer. She drew her sword and broke the array. Torrential waves surged over, the force of the collision was powerful. The middle-aged man looked at the surging waves and the sword energy hidden in them. His expression was calm and placid. He even had the time to take a sip of wine. Then, he used his fingers as a sword and casually drew a stroke. Clang! A sword energy directly cut through the huge waves. It was as if the curtain of the night had been pulled down, but it was suddenly cut off from the middle, revealing the day behind the night. I've been invincible for 3,000 years. I am the successor to the path of the sword. I've returned from the cycle of reincarnation. I will definitely bring glory to this new era. You attacked with a sword in front of me, the ignorant truly are fearless. I came to this era with the vast will of the sword, but you are like a firefly flaunting its light in front of the bright moon. The middle-aged man looked calm, but his words were confident. He directly declared that he was the successor to the path of the sword. Forming a sword with his hand, he cut through the waves and extinguished the sword energy that Princess Yulin had accumulated for almost a year. With another backhand push, the surging waves instantly vanished and calmed down. The sea returned to its original state. It's been a year, but you've only accumulated this much energy? Of course, this outcome is completely natural. After all, you can't compare to me. I am the successor to the path of the sword. I am the favored child of the path of the sword. My father became the Millennium Sword God because he basked in my light. It's your blessing that I destroyed your sword energy. Now, you should tell me where you learned the flying sword technique. Also, talk to me in detail as to how exactly did you cultivate in the flying sword technique. The middle-aged man was still confident. His words rang loud and clear. His face was full of sincerity. He didn't doubt himself at all. The highest realm of bragging was to make oneself believe it from the bottom of one's heart. Whether other people believed it or not had nothing to do with him. In any case, for him, he was telling the truth. Has anyone ever told you that you are narcissistic? Princess Yulin asked coldly. You think that I'm a narcissist? That's because you haven't reached my realm just yet. I'm just telling you the truth about myself. The middle-aged man shook his head with an expression that seemed to insinuate that the people of the world were foolish. I won't tell you where you learned the flying sword technique, nor will I teach you how I cultivated it. Besides, as the inheritor of the path of the sword, how come that you still need to learn the flying sword technique from me? Princess Yulin asked mockingly. The flying sword technique is my father's ultimate technique. Although I have countless sword techniques that can rival it, as his son, I definitely need to inherit his sword techniques. Now that he's dead, I shall show off the prowess of the flying sword technique to the world for him. In your hands, the might of the flying sword technique is pitifully weak. The middle-aged man shook his head. I once witnessed the full might of the flying sword technique. With one stroke, the sun, moon, and stars all became a foil. In the world, only the sharpness of that one stroke existed. Nothing else mattered. The flying sword technique is simply a waste in your hands. You will never be able to display its true might. The middle-aged man lamented. Is this the flying sword technique that you're talking about? Lin Jiufeng's voice sounded in the middle-aged man's ear. Clang! Immediately afterwards, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. He saw a new world. A world filled with sword energies. A world with sword energies that resembled dragons, seas, and abysses. With a stroke of the sword, the sun, moon, and the stars all became a foil. Nothing mattered anymore. Chapter 132, Walking Out from the Swordlight. The middle-aged man saw a world filled with swords. His confidence, his arrogance, and his composure disappeared in an instant. His hand holding the wine pot trembled. The glistening and aromatic wine spilled. But he didn't notice it at all. The middle-aged man swallowed hard, his heart turned cold. In his eyes, the world of swords had become incredibly vast and boundless. Clang! A streak of sword energy streaked and occupied the center of this world. It was abnormally gorgeous, making the sun, moon, and the stars its foil. The middle-aged man murmured, 3,000 years ago, Father once challenged an immortal. He used all of his strength and slashed out with his sword. It split the sky and attracted the attention of every living being in the world. This sword and that sword are similar. Was this originally executed by Father? The middle-aged man said that the Millennium Sword God had benefited from him. But to be honest, he respected and loved his father. Even though he knew that his father was already dead, he still wanted to find his corpse and obtain his father's flying sword technique. He wanted to personally execute that sword technique as a tribute to his father whom he dearly missed. But who would have thought that a sword move similar to his father's would suddenly appear before eyes? The middle-aged man gasped for air. Who is it? Who is imitating my father? This move is indeed formidable, but I have already surpassed my father. Your sword move is laughable in my eyes. I am the successor to the path of the sword. I am invincible with my sword. The middle-aged man let out a long roar. With a bang, he released all of his strength. Surging sword energy rolled out from his back like boiling seawater. A sea of sword energies. Boom! 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 The middle-aged man was flying in the air. Behind him emerged a sword energy wave that was even larger than the wave that Princess Yulin had stirred just now. The middle-aged man wanted to slash apart the incoming sword move. He attacked with fury. The surging sword energy condensed into a huge, terrifying broadsword. The broadsword seemed to be connected to the heavens itself as it slashed down. It was a shocking scene. The captive Princess Yulin looked over in surprise. She looked at the middle-aged man, confused. He was the only one on the empty beach. Why did he suddenly become so angry to the point that he executed such a terrifying move? Princess Yulin couldn't see what the middle-aged man was seeing. The mastermind behind all of this was Lin Jiufeng. He stood far away from the array formation and observed the scene calmly from where he stood. What the middle-aged man saw just now was just a glance from Lin Jiufeng mixed with a wisp of his sword aura. It was reflected in the middle-aged man's eyes. Lin Jiufeng didn't expect him to be so agitated that he immediately went berserk. The broadsword condensed from countless terrifying sword energies directly came crashing down. Ka! 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 The air trembled. Although the middle-aged man didn't know that Lin Jiufeng, the culprit, was so close to him, he was certain that he was right to slash in the direction where he saw the sword energy. Who dares to say that they are invincible in front of me? The middle-aged man was very confident. Once his broadsword landed, he would crush every opponent that dared to stand before him. Unfortunately, Lin Jiufeng remained indifferent. He only stretched out his hand and imitated the way the middle-aged man dealt with Princess Yulin. He used his finger as a sword. It directly slashed down. Boom! Lin Jiufeng's sword energy became the meaning of invincible. The aggressive and imposing broadsword directly broke in half. As the broadsword split into two, the middle-aged man spurted out a large mouthful of blood and retreated more than 10 steps. Each step he took was very forceful, causing the entire bay to tremble. Ta! 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 The middle-aged man's vital energy and blood were in turmoil. His face was flushed red, and his eyes were bloodshot. Veins bulged on his skin, making him look terrifying. He pointed in Lin Jiufeng's direction, wanting to say something. But in the very next moment, he spat out another mouthful of blood. The middle-aged man looked in Lin Jiufeng's direction. Despair twirled in his eyes. He still didn't see who it was that attacked him. He only saw a faint figure. A figure that walked out of the sword light. Then, the figure casually slashed. The figure defeated him as easily as he defeated Princess Yulin. The defeat he had just suffered made the middle-aged man recall something. 3,000 years ago, his father executed a sword move that stunned the world. His father fought against an immortal. The middle-aged man did not mention the outcome of that battle. Because the outcome was cruel. His father suffered a crushing defeat. The sword that stunned the world was nothing in the eyes of the immortal. In the blink of an eye, everything was over. He vividly remembered the scene of his father being beaten until he spat out large mouthfuls of blood. His father must have looked exactly as he was right now. Thus, he raised his head and looked at Lin Jiufeng, who walked out of the sword light. His bloodshot eyes were filled with horror. What he was feeling right now must be similar to what his father felt back then, right? Bathed in sword light, Lin Jiufeng walked into the formation. But the formation couldn't hurt him. Princess Yulin couldn't see him either. Only the middle-aged man could see him. He was laid on the ground in the pool of his own blood. His aura had completely dissipated. Like a dying patient, he pleaded for mercy. Lin Jiufeng's face was covered by the sword light, making him look even more mysterious. He looked at the kneeling middle-aged man and said, "Release Princess Yulin." "Who are you?" The middle-aged man gnashed his teeth and raised his head with all his might. Even though his eyes hurt from staring at the glaring sword light, he forcibly opened his eyes, wanting to see Lin Jiufeng's true appearance. But from the beginning till the end, he remained unable to see Lin Jiufeng's true appearance. In front of Lin Jiufeng, he was akin to a clown. "Release Princess Yulin. On account of your father, the Millennium Sword God, I will spare your life. Do you agree?" Lin Jiufeng asked calmly. The middle-aged man gasped heavily. In the end, he lowered his head. "I agree." Lin Jiufeng nodded in satisfaction and turned to leave. From the beginning to the end, he didn't make any large or powerful moves. He simply used his finger as a sword and chopped the broadsword into pieces. The world of swords that the middle-aged man saw was constructed by Lin Jiufeng alone. After agreeing to release Princess Yulin, Lin Jiufeng didn't make another move. He walked out of the sword light and concealed himself once again. He took every illusion that he conjured and returned the middle-aged man's senses to the real world. Beautiful bay, surging waves, and a quaint thatched hut. The scene sure was beautiful, but it was ruined by a middle-aged man lying in the pool of his own blood. So everything was just an illusion, the middle-aged man realized and was shocked. He finally understood his father's despair after the battle between him and that immortal ended. The middle-aged man used the last bits of his strength to disperse the formation suppressing Princess Yulin. Boom! Princess Yulin broke through the seawater and soared into the sky. Her clothes instantly dried up. She looked at the seriously injured middle-aged man with a suspicious look. She moved closer to him and asked, "Who managed to injure you to that extent?" "Take me to the Unrivalled God Dynasty, I'll be obedient," the middle-aged man pleaded weakly. What happened just now was a harsh reality check to the arrogant successor of the sword path. Princess Yulin was confused, understandably so, for she had no idea what had just happened. But she still brought the middle-aged man with her back to the Unrivalled God Dynasty. Chapter 133, in front of Emperor Yuan's tomb, Lin Jiufeng left through the sword light, leaving the middle-aged man and Princess Yulin on their own in their journey back to the Unrivalled God Dynasty. Even after he left, Lin Jiufeng didn't even know the middle-aged man's name. But he didn't have to know. The middle-aged man was just one of the countless opponents he defeated, that's all. Watching Princess Yulin leave with the seriously injured middle-aged man, Lin Jiufeng was relieved. The Empress Dowager's insomnia should finally be cured. This is also me honoring my word to Emperor Ming, Lin Jiufeng sighed. That middle-aged man is so powerful. If I was the one in front of him earlier, I wouldn't even be able to withstand a single move from him. But you only struck out so lightly, and yet he immediately spat out mouthfuls of blood. Just how strong are you today? The white cat was very curious about the height of Lin Jiufeng's current cultivation base. When they first met, they were in the same realm. But after a few decades, the gap between Lin Jiufeng and the white cat had widened to the point that it resembled the gap between the abyss and the sky. Just how powerful was Lin Jiufeng? The white cat really wanted to know. Actually, I'm not that powerful, Lin Jiufeng replied as he stood by the sea. The white cat looked at Lin Jiufeng suspiciously. When you've arrived in my realm, you will realize that this world is more complicated than you think. I am far from being invincible. Lin Jiufeng added honestly. Since you said that this world is very complicated, does that mean that there's someone out there that is stronger than you? The white cat asked curiously. So far? No one. Lin Jiufeng thought seriously for a while before he answered. The white cat looked at Lin Jiufeng solemnly. Meow. She suddenly extended her claws, wanting to scratch Lin Jiufeng. Despite saying such shameless words, his expression could actually remain so stoic? Lin Jiufeng grabbed her claws and rubbed them against his hand with a smile. Just because there isn't one now doesn't mean that there won't be one in the future. The curtain of this era has only just risen. Many people are waiting for the opportune moment to hop into the scene. The white cat's claws were in Lin Jiufeng's hands. She allowed Lin Jiufeng to play with them as she asked, then, where do you plan to go now? I'm going back to the imperial capital. Lin Jiufeng replied. I thought you wanted to see the world. The white cat was confused. Since he wanted to see the world, there was no need for him to return to the imperial capital anymore. Lin Jiufeng's gaze was deep as he replied, I want to visit Emperor Yuan. After entering seclusion, Lin Jiufeng had never once visited Emperor Yuan. Now that he had decided to go take a look at the world, he decided to visit Emperor Yuan before anything else. Meow. The white cat stopped asking questions. She knew that Lin Jiufeng's relationship with Emperor Yuan was very good. After saving Princess Yulin and taking a good look at the sea, Lin Jiufeng turned around and brought the white cat back to the imperial capital. The timing of their return to the imperial capital was about the same as Princess Yulin's, one arrived shortly after the other. Princess Yulin arrived first, and Lin Jiufeng the second. It was mainly because Lin Jiufeng was enjoying the scenery along the way and wasn't in a hurry to travel. In any case, Emperor Yuan was beneath the royal cemetery, it wasn't like he could escape. Lin Jiufeng wasn't in a hurry. So when he returned to the imperial capital, it was already bustling with so much activity. Princess Yulin, who had been suppressed for a year, actually returned on her own. The captured Princess Yulin managed to return on her own. On top of that, she also severely injured the overseas middle-aged swordsman who caused a ruckus in the world back then. And she even brought him back with her. The revelation shocked everyone. A year ago, the peerless genius of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty, the pride of the dynasty, the doting younger sister of Emperor De, and the fairy-like Princess Yulin agreed to a duel with a swordsman from overseas. Everyone had paid attention to that duel back then. But the result caused an uproar throughout the world. Princess Yulin only lasted 3 moves before the nameless swordsman. After 3 moves, she was suppressed and captured. The result bore chaos among the people. A group of people ridiculed the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. The stable Xuanhuang God Dynasty had begun to show cracks once again. If it weren't for the war machine that hindered the middle-aged swordsman's actions, the Xuanhuang God Dynasty would have suffered a great catastrophe. A year ago, the war machine became the symbol of faith in the hearts of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty's people. A year had passed since then, everyone in the Xuanhuang God Dynasty and the world was about to forget the fact that Princess Yulin was still being held captive. But no one expected that Princess Yulin would actually come back with such grandeur. She severely injured the person who held her captive and even brought him back to the imperial capital with her. The entire imperial capital was thrown into yet again another uproar. Many people surrounded Princess Yulin, their large numbers filled the southern gate of the imperial capital to the brim that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The street was filled with a 5-kilometer-long entourage of curious commoners that wanted to witness Princess Yulin's beauty. Of course, they also wanted to look at the middle-aged swordsman who captured her last year. When Emperor De found out that Princess Yulin had returned, he immediately came out of the Forbidden City and personally welcomed her. He was overjoyed, to say the least. The siblings that were separated from each other for over a year cried in joy and hugged each other in front of the entire world. The entire imperial capital was basked in a celebratory mood. They rejoiced in the name of Princess Yulin. Their voices shook the sky. Among these fanatical people, a Prince Lin Jiufeng walked past. He sealed his ears, too lazy to listen to the deafening cheers. The fervor around him and Lin Jiufeng's calmness formed a sharp contrast. But no one noticed. Everyone was looking at Princess Yulin. Emperor De saw a familiar figure from the corner of his eyes. Emperor De's face lit up. He quickly turned his head, but he couldn't find the figure anymore. Lin Jiufeng's figure had completely disappeared amidst the crowd. Emperor De frowned as he looked at the fervent crowd around him. But in the end, he didn't call out. The noise of the outside world, the fanaticism of the people, and the celebratory mood of everyone, all of these had nothing to do with Lin Jiufeng. He didn't return to the cold palace. He came to the royal cemetery and saw two simple tombs side by side. Their tombs were simple and unsophisticated, unlike the other emperors. Lin Jiufeng walked to the tomb of Emperor Yuan. He put his palms together and bowed. "Brother." "Big brother is here to see you," Lin Jiufeng called out softly. He looked at the fallen leaves and the weeds that grew tenaciously. Lin Jiufeng personally cleaned them up. He didn't use his true qi. Instead, he cleaned them up physically. He cleaned the entire cemetery for both Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming. Then, Lin Jiufeng stood in front of Emperor Yuan's tomb. His expression remained calm. It has been 50 to 60 years since Emperor Yuan died. Seeing his tomb, Lin Jiufeng definitely didn't feel sad at all. In contrast, he was at peace. Yes. At peace. Time healed all wounds. Since Emperor Yuan's death, Lin Jiufeng's visit to the royal cemetery could only be counted by one hand. At his first visit, he was afraid that he couldn't handle the sadness. But now, he knew that the souls of Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming had reincarnated into a new world. These tombs merely held their corpses. So there was nothing to be sad about. Your grandson, Emperor De, managed the Unrivalled God Dynasty very well. I think he's even better than you as the emperor. Lin Jiufeng teased with a smile. With him around in the Unrivalled God Dynasty, I'm relieved. He's in good health and didn't mess around like his grandpa emperor and father emperor. In this brand new era filled with abundant spiritual energy, living for 1,000 years wouldn't be a problem for him at all. With the Unrivalled God Dynasty in his hands, I am at ease. You guys can rest assured too. Lin Jiufeng said to Emperor Yuan. But he also criticized Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming. Their reckless actions had contributed to their early deaths after all. Alright, my strength has improved tremendously since then and I'm also cultivating that fate-changing technique. My cultivation speed is also fast. I can feel that it's not long until I can execute the technique, Lin Jiufeng softly added. When he first received the fate-changing technique, he didn't see any hope at all. But now, he could at least see hope. With hope, everything was possible. Chapter 134, The Situation in Jiangnan. The fate-changing technique was a powerful and terrifying technique. Despite understanding how it worked and how to execute it, Lin Jiufeng remained unable to use it. The requirements for its activation were simply too high. Not only Lin Jiufeng had to be sufficiently powerful himself, but he also had to sacrifice a peerless powerhouse for the technique. For now, Lin Jiufeng didn't have a peerless powerhouse to sacrifice. In addition, Lin Jiufeng believed that he wasn't that strong to resurrect someone from the dead just yet. He still couldn't traverse between the world of the living and the dead to find both the souls of Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming. Hence, Lin Jiufeng still had to become stronger. If I want to become even stronger, I have to visit different mystical places in this world. I must sign in at those places. Only when I do this can I possibly become even stronger than I am today. Lin Jiufeng silently thought. The cold palace and the land of extreme negative energy gave Lin Jiufeng 80 years worth of sign-in materials. But now that they were no longer useful to him, he had to go somewhere else. This visit of his to see Emperor Yuan was also a kind of farewell. He didn't know how long it would take for him to return. He might be back very soon. But he might also not return for a long time. Hence, Lin Jiufeng talked about many things to Emperor Yuan. He shared some worries that he had in his heart with the latter. Just as Lin Jiufeng was paying his respects to Emperor Yuan, footsteps sounded in the quiet royal cemetery. Lin Jiufeng looked over in surprise. Someone was coming. Lin Jiufeng instantly identified the untimely intruder. He was surprised. How did he know that he was here? It wasn't an intruder at all. It was Emperor De. He walked in all alone and saw Lin Jiufeng's back in the distance. Big granduncle. Emperor De called out respectfully. Lin Jiufeng turned to look at him and asked curiously, "How did you know that I was here?" "When Yulin returned, I saw your back in the crowd," Emperor De replied honestly. Lin Jiufeng raised his brows. Emperor De saw his figure in that sea of people? His eyes must be pretty good. "I escorted Yulin into the Forbidden City to see Mother, then I went to the Cold Palace. I didn't find you there, so I thought of this place," Emperor De said. "You are very meticulous in your ways." Lin Jiufeng praised. "Big granduncle, I have fulfilled the promise that I made back then." The already matured Emperor De became a little shy in front of Lin Jiufeng. Despite that, his voice remained proud as he declared the completion of his promise. He promised Lin Jiufeng that the Unrivalled God Dynasty would definitely still exist when Lin Jiufeng came out of seclusion. And then about 30 years later, despite the great changes happening to the world, the Unrivalled God Dynasty remained in existence. Emperor De still looked like he was in his 20s after 30 years. He wanted to prove himself to Lin Jiufeng. "You have done well. You've stabilized the Unrivalled God Dynasty on your own. You have perfectly inherited the will of both Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming. Not only that, but you have also brought the dynasty into greater heights. Among the previous emperors of the Unrivalled God Dynasty, you are a formidable candidate to become the best out of all of them." Lin Jiufeng was not stingy with his praise. Emperor De really did a good job. Lin Jiufeng naturally had to praise him. Emperor De smiled like a baby. In front of Lin Jiufeng, he wasn't as scheming and as sly as others described him to be. "Big granduncle, are you going to continue with your stay in the Cold Palace after coming out of seclusion?" Emperor De asked. "No, I want to take a look at this world." Lin Jiufeng shook his head. So many forces from the previous era had come out. Their appearance had naturally turned this world into an exciting one. Naturally, I have to take a look. He no longer had any reason to stay in the Cold Palace. Big granduncle, the Buddhist, Taoist, and demonic sects are the primary creators of these chaotic waves throughout the world. There are the three top factions, the Quanjin sect, the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower, and the 6 paths of reincarnation of the demonic sects. Other than that, there's also the Temple of Gods in the Wildlands and the Essence Chi sect in the Plains. They are both top factions that must never be underestimated. Of course, I believe that there are still those that are hidden in Loki. Emperor De told Lin Jiufeng all about these things as if he knew them by heart. He admired and respected Lin Jiufeng, especially after being the emperor for so many years. He inherited everything from Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming, so he naturally knew that Lin Jiufeng had been secretly supporting the Unrivalled God Dynasty for decades. Unknowingly, Lin Jiufeng had also become an important figure to him in his heart. "I'm about to leave. You've done well in the Unrivalled God Dynasty over the years. You should continue doing whatever you are doing to maintain this stability and peace," Lin Jiufeng reminded. Emperor De nodded and replied firmly, I will devote my whole life to the Yuhua God Dynasty. Lin Jiufeng looked at Emperor Di and said in satisfaction, "It's good that you have such confidence." Afterwards, he added, "Don't tell Princess Yulin that I've come out of seclusion. I'll leave the imperial capital immediately and focus on cultivating. I have no particular place to go to, so there's no need for you to reveal my appearance to her, lest she follows me wherever I go." Emperor Di carved Lin Jiufeng's words into his heart and replied, "I understand. Since Big Granduncle wants to continue cultivating, I recommend Granduncle to go to the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower." "Why? Is the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower different from other places?" Lin Jiufeng was curious. "There are Buddha's relics, golden bodies, and many other strange things in the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower. Over the years, I have sent a number of scouts to infiltrate their ranks. I learned that there seems to be something terrifying beneath the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower," Emperor Di said solemnly. "Is the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower really that terrifying?" Lin Jiufeng asked. "As far as I know, the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower is currently the most terrifying among the top factions," Emperor Di said rather seriously. "There used to be 3 Buddhist sects in the Jiangnan area: Dalan Temple, Shaolin Temple, and Xiankong Temple. But both Shaolin and Xiankong Temple have already been annexed by the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower. The foundations of these 2 Buddhist sects have become the foundation of the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower. With this move, they immediately became the biggest power in the Jiangnan area. The power and prestige of our Yuhua God Dynasty in Jiangnan has become increasingly difficult to maintain over the years," Emperor Di said solemnly. Lin Jiufeng listened quietly. He looked at Emperor Di and asked, "Is the imperial court already struggling to maintain control of the Jiangnan area?" Emperor Di recommended him to go to the Jiangnan area to take a look at the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower. Lin Jiufeng immediately guessed that there was a problem in the Jiangnan area. Emperor Di sighed and said, "I don't dare to hide it from Big Granduncle. The 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower has already suppressed the Jiangnan area to the point that the people there are trembling from fear. The news that I received from various scouts and spies all said that there is great danger in the Jiangnan area and that the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower is very terrifying. But no one knows what exactly is that danger and just what happened to Jiangnan. No one has entered the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to come out. I just feel that if we don't do something about the Jiangnan area soon, something bad will definitely happen." Emperor Di looked at Lin Jiufeng sincerely. "Big Granduncle, since you want to see the world, why don't you start from the Jiangnan area? For the safety of the common people there, I implore you to please check what's going on in the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower during your journey." Emperor Di knelt and begged Lin Jiufeng. He came to find Lin Jiufeng in a hurry because of this problem. The solution to the problem in the Jiangnan area couldn't be delayed any longer. It had to be handled urgently. Lin Jiufeng looked at the kneeling Emperor Di and replied, "After coming out of seclusion, I saved Princess Yulin. It's not good to favor one over the other. I'll help you take a look at this 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower as a reward for your hard work for the past 30 years. Hearing Emperor Di's words, Lin Jiufeng was a little tempted too. Since he hadn't decided on where to go yet, he would go to the Jiangnan area to take a look at this 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower. Moreover, his one and only friend, Dachuan, was also in Jiangnan. Lin Jiufeng planned to visit him on the way. "Thank you, Big Granduncle." Emperor Di kowtowed in delight. "Get up. I cannot accept the Emperor's kowtow." Lin Jiufeng took a step back, refusing to let Emperor Di kowtow to him. "By the way, where did you arrange for Dachuan to be?" Lin Jiufeng asked. Chapter 135, Transformation. Dachuan was arranged to be the governor of a region in the Jiangnan area. He held an official position lasting over 4 dynasties. Considering how he was also a peak martial sage realm expert 30 years ago, he was indeed suitable for the position assigned to him. But after 30 years, Dachuan had long resigned from his post. Lin Jiufeng was surprised when he heard Emperor Di. Although Dachuan didn't have a strong desire to become an official, it had only been 30 years since he returned to his hometown and became the governor of a region in Jiangnan. There should be no reason for him to resign. His body was also in peak condition. Thus, his resignation definitely wasn't because of poor health. Could it be that he was in danger? Was that the reason why he resigned? Lin Jiufeng guessed. But Dachuan still had Lin Jiufeng's sword energy in him. Once Dachuan encountered danger, the sword energy in him would activate and save him. Since the sword energy still existed, it proved that Dachuan didn't fall into any mortal danger over the past 30 years. Seeing Lin Jiufeng's confusion, Emperor Di added. Dachuan wrote a letter saying that his old mother is seriously ill and that as a son, he has to mourn for 10 years without going into politics or showing his face in public. Hearing Emperor Di's words, Lin Jiufeng could only sigh. I'll see if we'll cross paths in Jiangnan. After bidding farewell to Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming, as well as Emperor Di, Lin Jiufeng waved coolly and left without looking back. Facing the afterglow of the setting sun, Lin Jiufeng's back looked elegant and unrestrained. He soon disappeared without a trace. Emperor Di was left standing alone before Emperor Yuan and Emperor Ming's tombs. Father, Grandpa Emperor, the foundation that you have laid and the dynasty that you have passed down onto me won't be destroyed in the coming years. With big granduncle supporting me, the Unrivalled God Dynasty will continue to exist. Emperor Di stated firmly. The imperial capital was thrown into an uproar upon Princess Yulin's return. As far as the eye could see, there were festivities. Many people cheered incessantly. No one noticed Lin Jiufeng's departure. He left and directly headed to Jiangnan with the white cat. I've never been to Jiangnan before. I've only seen the scenery of Jiangnan in books. They say it's surrounded by greenery and water, the white cat said. I've never been to Jiangnan before either, Lin Jiufeng replied. When he suppressed both Shaolin and Xuanhuang Temple back then, he only used 2 paintings to do so. His true body never left the imperial capital. His 2 paintings had forced Shaolin and Xuanhuang Temple to surrender without giving them a chance to resist. There was practically no human god expert at that time, the common people had to kneel and worship them as gods. But as the Golden Age arrived, human gods had become just another realm in the cultivation path. This term didn't represent anything terrifying anymore. This was a part of the changes brought by the beginning of a golden era. In front of the human god realm appeared the Grotto Heaven realm, the Supremacy realm, and Lin Jiufeng's current realm. What's the name of the realm you are in? The white cat asked curiously. She still had no idea about the name of Lin Jiufeng's current realm. It has been 30 years, but Lin Jiufeng never talked about his realm. He remained mysterious, his realm, seemingly shrouded by a cloud of fog. Lin Jiufeng hugged the white cat as the corner of his lips curled up. Take a look at this vast world, now tell me. What adjective can you think of to describe this world? The white cat looked around carefully as many words flashed across her mind. But she didn't know which word Lin Jiufeng was the most appropriate. Boundless. Lin Jiufeng gave the answer. After the 9 levels of the Supremacy realm was the Boundless realm. Boundless sea, boundless wind and cloud, boundless true chi. Boundless was a very terrifying realm. I see. The white cat suddenly understood. Then, she became envious. She also wanted to enter the Boundless realm. Make a breakthrough into the Grotto Heaven realm first and then enter the Supremacy realm. Only after you've done all of these should you think about the Boundless realm. Lin Jiufeng patted the white cat's head. The white cat shook her head and replied, if I made a breakthrough into the Supremacy realm, I might be able to transform into human form. Lin Jiufeng finally remembered that the white cat had the ability to transform. Ordinary demonic beasts would be able to transform after they made a breakthrough into the human god realm. Those who were stronger with more powerful bloodlines would have to wait until they've reached the Grotto Heaven realm. But even true dragons, phoenixes, and other godly beasts could already take on human form at the Grotto Heaven realm. There was a saying, the stronger the bloodline, the later the transformation. Those that needed to wait until the Grotto Heaven realm to take on human forms had extremely powerful bloodlines. But after the white cat made a breakthrough into the Grotto Heaven realm, she still couldn't take on a human form. Lin Jiufeng didn't know what was wrong with the white cat. Its bloodline was nothing special, right? From the moment she started cultivating until now, hundreds to thousands of years had passed. Since she started cultivating, she had always relied on external resources to break through. Using the resources that the demon lord had accumulated throughout his entire life, the white cat arrived at the martial sage realm. When the white cat followed Lin Jiufeng, she ate about 60% of the things that Lin Jiufeng received from signing in. Then, she still had to expend a lot of energy to make a breakthrough into the human god realm. In the end, under Lin Jiufeng's forceful pulling, the white cat was forcibly pulled into the grotto heaven realm. It was only when Lin Jiufeng received another divine-grade grotto heaven from signing in that the white cat's talent improved ever so slightly. But that was all. In this case, was the white cat a genius amongst demonic beasts? Lin Jiufeng didn't think so at all. She was just Lin Jiufeng's little white cat, that's all. A female cat. However, if one were to calculate according to the patterns that the demon beast race had always followed throughout their lives, then, the white cat's bloodline was certainly stronger than that of dragons and phoenixes. This was because dragons and phoenixes were able to take on human forms after arriving at the grotto heaven realm. But the white cat still couldn't. The white cat said that she might be able to take on a human form upon arriving at the supremacy realm. The keywords were, might be able to. It meant that she still wasn't confident about taking on a human form. What breed are you exactly? Why haven't you transformed despite how easy it is for other demonic beasts to take human form? Lin Jiufeng found it strange. He reached out and picked up the little white cat, carefully inspecting her. Just what bloodline is coursing through your veins? Why can't you take on a human form just yet, considering how easy it is for other beasts to take on human forms after arriving at a certain cultivation realm? Lin Jiufeng found it strange. He reached out and carried the white cat. Then, he carefully inspected every nook and cranny of her body. Meow. The white cat called out in embarrassment and glared at Lin Jiufeng. Lin Jiufeng finally remembered that she was a member of the opposite sex. All right. Just cultivate in peace, will you? It will be best if you can take on a human form after you've arrived at the supremacy realm. I'm interested to see how you'll look as a human being. Lin Jiufeng hugged the white cat. He dropped the matter altogether. I will definitely take on a human form. When the time comes, I will let you see what it means to be stunning. The little white cat knocked her little head against Lin Jiufeng's chest as she stated in a loud and clear voice. All right, I'm looking forward to it. But you have to cultivate properly first, and then successfully take on a human form to amaze me, Lin Jiufeng said perfunctorily. Just how beautiful would the white cat be as a human being? Although this cat was extremely beautiful in her cat form. Although the white cat was already an eye candy in her cat form. Her cat form was her true form. Thus, Lin Jiufeng was interested to see how she would look after taking on a human form. Of course, Lin Jiufeng wasn't actually looking forward to how beautiful a catwoman could be. It only took Lin Jiufeng a day to arrive at Xuanhuang. His speed remained relatively fast even as he played around with the white cat. On his first step into Xuanhuang, a line of words appeared before Lin Jiufeng's eyes. Do you want to sign in at Xuanhuang, the land of mist and rain? Lin Jiufeng was surprised. This works too? The Xuanhuang area covered a vast expanse of land, but it could still be used as a one-time sign-in opportunity? The line of words kept flashing in front of Lin Jiufeng's eyes without stopping. It was obviously not an illusion, but real. Do you want to sign in? Sign in. Lin Jiufeng agreed decisively. Chapter 136, Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts Portrait. A sign-in opportunity appeared on his first step into Xuanhuang. Sign-in successful. Received Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts Portrait. A portrait appeared in Lin Jiufeng's hand. Then, every information regarding the Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts portrait appeared in his mind. This is actually a magic treasure portrait. Naturally born in the Xuanhuang area at that. Lin Jiufeng exclaimed in surprise. The portrait in his hand looked elegant. He slowly opened it. Inside was the rich, beautiful, poetic, and picturesque scenery of Xuanhuang. There were small bridges with flowing water and families as far as the eye could see. But upon closer inspection, there were countless imperceptible black spots hidden in this painting. One black dot represented a single ghost or evil spirit. The Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts portrait is a treasure naturally born in the Xuanhuang area. Since I've received this portrait as a reward for signing in. Does this mean that the land of Xuanhuang wants me to help in removing these ghosts from the Xuanhuang area? Lin Jiufeng murmured. The Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts portrait was a gift from the land of Xuanhuang. The land here is sentient. It gave me this powerful magic treasure that can suppress ghosts and refine them into energy. Once I've exterminated the ghosts in the Xuanhuang area, this magic treasure will absorb a huge amount of ghost energy and turn into an immortal artifact. Lin Jiufeng read through all the information he received and was surprised by the discovery. He originally thought that it was simply just a painting, but who would have thought that it was a magic treasure? But just as he thought that being a magic treasure was its limit, it turned out that it could be an immortal artifact. Although it didn't have the might of an immortal artifact yet, nor was it as terrifying as a real immortal artifact, as long as Lin Jiufeng exterminated the evil ghosts and spirits in the Xuanhuang area, he would be able to make up for what this magic treasure lacked. The land of Xuanhuang is tempting me. Lin Jiufeng laughed. If this is your attempt in tempting me, I just want to say, you've succeeded. Lin Jiufeng decisively put away the Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts portrait. After all, he had a kind heart. Moreover, the crucial question was, who possibly could reject an immortal artifact? Lin Jiufeng gradually calmed down. After obtaining the Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts portrait, he finally understood why the moment he stepped into the Xuanhuang area, the system immediately alerted him that he could sign in. The process behind it was simple. In short, the land of Xuanhuang itself gave Lin Jiufeng an immortal artifact to ask for his help in eliminating the ghosts and evil spirits in Xuanhuang. In the beginning, Lin Jiufeng was puzzled as to why there was a choice to sign in when he had just stepped into the Xuanhuang area. He hadn't arrived in a special place yet, he had just stepped foot into its borders, yet he could already sign in? In the past, when he stepped onto the plains and the desert lands, he never received a notification to sign in. Why was there a notification immediately upon reaching Xuanhuang? It seems that the population of ghosts and evil spirits in the Xuanhuang area has already reached unprecedented levels, and that's why the land of Xuanhuang is so desperate. Lin Jiufeng started to feel a sense of urgency upon realizing this. Emperor depleted for him to visit the Xuanhuang area. He also said that the situation in the Xuanhuang area was already to the point that it could no longer be delayed nor ignored. But despite this, Lin Jiufeng had never expected to receive an incomplete immortal artifact as a welcome gift upon his arrival in the Xuanhuang area. This Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts portrait was obviously not born in this era. Lin Jiufeng observed carefully and was very certain of this theory of his. How many years had it been since the world started to recover its spiritual energy? The foundations of the forces in the Xuanhuang area weren't that deep yet. Not to mention nurturing an immortal artifact, the resources in the Xuanhuang area weren't even enough to satisfy the demon-slaying sword in Lin Jiufeng's hand. And this incomplete Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts portrait wasn't something that could be born in just tens of years. I'm even more curious about the Xuanhuang area now. Lin Jiufeng's interest was piqued. Perhaps the changes in the Xuanhuang area all started because of the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower's arrival. Lin Jiufeng's gaze was deep. Meow, why are you still standing here? The white cat asked curiously. She watched as Lin Jiufeng stood without moving nor speaking. A painting suddenly appeared in his hand, but he then put it away. Strange. Lin Jiufeng came back to his senses and said, "It's my first time in Xuanhuang. Of course, I'm excited." But the white cat didn't understand why he was so excited. There didn't seem to be any scenery worthy of his attention around them. Lin Jiufeng didn't explain. He carried the white cat and advanced deeper into the Xuanhuang area at a rapid pace. Xuanhuang, spring rain, river. When the sun rose, the flowers on the river would always become redder than fire. When spring came, the river water turned as green as blue. Standing beside a big river in Xuanhuang, Lin Jiufeng looked at the green mountains on both sides of the river. Rain fell and landed on the water. Rings of circles spread out like the growth rings of a tree. This was Jiangnan Prefecture, the largest state in Jiangnan. There were tens of millions of people living here, and the lands of the 5 states were built close to the stunning sights of Jiangnan. The river rippled with green waves. A small boat was currently crossing the river. An old man was supporting the boat when he saw a young master, Lin Jiufeng, standing close to the shore. Lin Jiufeng was dressed in embroidered clothes and had an ethereal bearing, looking indescribably noble. "Young master, do you want to take a boat across the river?" the old man shouted with a thick Jiangnan accent. Lin Jiufeng lowered his head and asked the white cat, "Do you want to take a boat?" The white cat meowed lazily. "Yes." Lin Jiufeng waved for the boatman to come over. The boatman waved the paddle happily. The boat came slowly and leaned against the shore. Lin Jiufeng boarded the boat and put the white cat down. "Young master, where are you going?" the boatman asked. "Just stroll around and follow the river." "Anywhere is fine," Lin Jiufeng said nonchalantly as he handed a handful of Unrivalled God Dynasty silver to the boatman. The boatman agreed happily. He moved the boat and weaved through the misty rain. The boat wasn't moving fast. There were green mountains on both sides of the river, and it was also morning. The morning fog from the mountains filled the air and spread over the water. Together with the spring rain, the hazy beauty of the landscape painting came crashing into his face. Lin Jiufeng and the white cat sat in the cabin of the boat. Both of them were more obedient than the other. Their eyes were filled with curiosity as they watched the scenery that belonged solely to Jiangnan. Misty rain Jiangnan, a hazy beauty. Though similar to Lin Jiufeng and the white cat who had never seen such a scene before, it was extremely attractive. The old man who was rowing the boat wore a raincoat. He was not afraid of the rain as he asked with a smile, "Young master, is this your first time in Jiangnan?" "Yes." "How old are you?" Lin Jiufeng asked with a smile. "I'm 69 this year." "To be honest with you, young master, old folks my age are often already 6 feet under in the previous years. But thanks to the recovery of the world's spiritual energy, despite my age, I don't feel old. I feel healthy, my body has never been this great. In addition, the reigning emperor is wise and mighty. We are able to eat 3 meals a day until we're full, all thanks to his reforms and laws." I have to admit, the Unrivalled God Dynasty had never enjoyed this much development compared to when it was still in the hands of the previous emperors. The boatman was quite talkative. "Young master, you look quite young. Are you still cultivating in a martial temple?" the boatman asked curiously. A strange expression appeared on Lin Jiufeng's face. "Little brother, you're only 69 years old. I'm already more than 100 years old." Lin Jiufeng muttered in his heart. But he didn't say anything. He just shook his head and smiled. "I'm not a student of any martial temple." "That's a pity. Young master is so young, you should have gone to a martial temple." The boatman sighed. In the eyes of ordinary people like them, being a student of a martial temple was the key to success. They considered it one of the best places to be in the world. Since its establishment 30 years ago, everyone in the world has come to know about martial temples. The martial temples dominated every other school out there, and it reigned supreme over those that aspired to be peerless cultivators. Emperor De even went around inviting powerhouses to be the teachers in the countless martial temples that he had established. In addition, he even invited the demons that Lin Jiufeng had suppressed back then to come and teach the students. He also ordered a few powerhouses to search and plunder all sorts of secret manuals and techniques from ruins and other sects so that they could be shared with the students. More importantly, Emperor De also taught the students one thing: to love their country. His work had greatly increased the cohesion of the entire Unrivalled God Dynasty. When Lin Jiufeng heard the boatman's words, he echoed with a sigh. "It's a pity that the martial temples do not want me." The white cat rolled her eyes at Lin Jiufeng. If Emperor De heard what he had just said, the latter would definitely be confused. Chapter 137, Dalan Temple. A small boat crossed the broad river. It went through the mist as its occupants admired the scene. Lin Jiufeng, however, continued to chat with the old boatman. The old man was talkative. He had a thick Jiangnan accent and he spoke in its dialect mixed with the official language of the Unrivalled God Dynasty. He sounded strange to Lin Jiufeng, but the latter knew and understood that it was due to the dialect. Along the way, he told Lin Jiufeng about the many geniuses in the martial temples. The geniuses nurtured by the martial temples had all made a breakthrough into the human god realm before the age of 30. What was more astounding was that the most talented one among them was already a general of the Unrivalled God Dynasty despite the young age. The 2 recruitment sessions of the martial temples that happened every year had already become some sort of a festival. It was now considered to be one of the liveliest events in the world. The old man even said proudly, "Both of my grandsons are students of a martial temple. Although they are not that outstanding, I am already very satisfied with their results. Once they've graduated from the martial temple, I will ask them to go and serve the country for His Majesty, Emperor De. I want them to punish the evil and spread good deeds." Lin Jiufeng smiled and gave the old man a big thumbs up. "Old man, have you heard of the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower?" Lin Jiufeng suddenly asked. The old man was taken aback. "Young master, why are you asking about those evil monks?" "Evil monks?" Lin Jiufeng looked at the old man quizzically. "The 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower is that tall tower in the middle of the West Lake. The moment they appeared, they annexed both the Shaolin and Xuanhuang temple. Moreover, over the years, many commoners who lived close to the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower have been saying that every night, there would be strange wailings inside the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower." The old man wore a solemn look. Lin Jiufeng raised his brows. "What? Why would there be wailing?" Lin Jiufeng asked curiously. "Who knows? But I heard that someone saw terrifying phantoms in the waters of the West Lake every night of the full moon. Some say that those ghastly figures are the fossils of archaic monsters, but they also seem to be extremely terrifying ghosts. Don't you think that it's strange for a Buddhist sect to have so many weird things right in their backyard?" the old man asked. "That is indeed quite strange." Lin Jiufeng nodded in agreement. "That is why not many people have gone to the West Lake recently. I'll advise the same. If you can help it, don't visit that place often," the old man reminded Lin Jiufeng. "All right, I'll keep that in mind." Lin Jiufeng nodded seriously. Talking about the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower seemed to have greatly dampened the old man's mood. He focused on pushing the boat and steering it with the flow of the river. Lin Jiufeng didn't say anything anymore. He closed his eyes and carefully observed the Jiangnan 100 Ghosts portrait. The Jiangnan 100 Ghosts portrait was an immortal artifact, but its might had been greatly reduced. To recover its true power, the only way to do so was to complete the Jiangnan 100 Ghosts portrait. That was why Lin Jiufeng said that the Jiangnan area was luring him over. He couldn't resist the temptation. He wanted the immortal artifact. Thus, he started to study on how to complete the Jiangnan 100 Ghosts portrait. There are so many black spots, and each of them is supposed to represent a ghost or an evil spirit. But it doesn't matter, they'll all die the same anyway, Lin Jiufeng thought to himself. Everything was bound to be difficult at the very beginning. It wasn't easy to complete the Jiangnan 100 Ghosts portrait either. The first step was to think carefully. After studying the portrait, Lin Jiufeng finally placed his gaze on a Buddhist sect. It wasn't the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower, but the Dalan Temple. In the past, there were 3 Buddhist sects in the Jiangnan area. They were of the same lineage, but due to their differences in ideals, they became distant from each other. Shaolin Temple, Xuanhuang Temple, and Dalan Temple. Among them, Shaolin Temple and Xuanhuang Temple were the more well-known Buddhist sects. They had a lot of believers to the point that they could build their temples with donations alone. Shaolin Temple and Xuanhuang Temple seemed to be competing with each other back then as they speedily constructed their temples. Only the monks in Dalan Temple guarded their own territory and abided by their duties as monks to live in peace and quiet. Both Shaolin and Xuanhuang Temple were very high profile in their actions. But at their peak, they were suppressed by Lin Jiufeng's paintings without being able to resist at all. They declined until the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower appeared. The latter annexed both temples and they had completely lost their previous identities. The two once glorious Buddhist sacred lands were no more. On the other hand, the low-key Dalan Temple continued to persist. After observing the Jiangnan 100 Ghosts portrait for a long time, Lin Jiufeng finally decided on his first step in the Jiangnan area. He shall go to Dalan Temple. I still remember it. There's a demon's den in Dalan Temple, Lin Jiufeng recalled. Decades ago, Miss Han wanted to repay Lin Jiufeng's kindness. She got Monk Xingyun from the Jiangnan area to come and look for Lin Jiufeng. At that time, Monk Xingyun said that there was a demon's den in the back mountain of the Dalan Temple. The seniors of the Dalan Temple chose to construct a mountain gate there in order to suppress the demons in the demon's den. During the recovery of the world's spiritual energy, the Dalan Temple was on the verge of losing its control over the demon's den. The pack of demons back then had almost succeeded in causing chaos in Jiangnan. Fortunately, Miss Hong appeared at the critical moment. At that time, she suppressed the demon's den and set up a huge array to put an end to the struggle. When Miss Hong left, she casually gave Monk Xingyun a few pointers and he made a breakthrough into the human god realm with the help of the former's words. One thing led to another and Miss Hong ended up using her paper cranes to summon powerhouses that she ordered to look for the dethroned crown prince, Lin Jiufeng. Lin Jiufeng had long placed this part of his past in the deep recesses of his mind. If it weren't for the black spots, the ghosts, and evil spirits in the Jiangnan 100 Ghosts portrait, the Dalan Temple would have remained hidden in Lin Jiufeng's mind. There are problems with both the Dalan Temple and the 10,000 Buddha Sacred Tower in the Jiangnan area, but the problem at the Dalan Temple should be easier to solve. This was the reason why Lin Jiufeng chose the Dalan Temple. Of course, the demon's den there was also part of the reason. Lin Jiufeng was curious if the demon's den at the Dalan Temple was the same as the demon's den beneath the Cold Palace. Boatman, go to the Dalan Temple, Lin Jiufeng said. The old man agreed. Following the river, the scenery along the way became better and better. When noon came, the morning fog dissipated. The thousands of miles of river water and its placid waves were laid bare. In the village by the shore, smoke curled up from the chimneys of the houses there. The chickens and dogs seemed to be playing with each other, and the aroma of good organic food seemed to be constantly in the air, reassuring the ordinary families living by the shore that they would never run out of food with the grace of nature. Both Lin Jiufeng and the white cat observed the scene. The scene matched the scenery in Jiangnan. It was not dramatic at all. Instead, seeing the lives of the ordinary people made Lin Jiufeng feel comfortable. Just looking at their smiles could cleanse one's soul. The old man constantly steered and controlled the boat along the river. It was only when they arrived close to a huge mountain filled with greenery in the late afternoon did the old man stop holding the boat paddle. Young master, we've arrived at the closest pier to the Dalan Temple. Move along this pier. The Dalan Temple is still 100 miles away. The temple is very famous, but they only receive a limited number of believers every day. You might not be able to enter the Dalan Temple today. The old boatman kindly reminded. Lin Jiufeng took out some silver and handed it over to the old boatman. Thank you for your reminder, little brother. Lin Jiufeng smiled lightly and turned around to leave. What young master? What young man? I'm 40 years older than you. Lin Jiufeng left coolly, leaving behind a dumbfounded old man supporting the boat. He was baffled by Lin Jiufeng's parting words. Mount Daqing. Dalan Temple. In the past, this Buddhist sect of the Jiangnan region had always kept a low profile. Even now, it was still keeping a low profile. Even though both Shaolin and Xiankong Temple were no more, Dalan Temple still maintained its own leisurely pace. It still ignored the changes of the outside world. During this period of time, Dalan Temple announced that they would no longer receive any believers. They didn't explain why. The Dalan Temple didn't reveal anything to the public. Under such circumstances, Lin Jiufeng still visited the temple on a boat. Chapter 138, Death Surrogate Puppet. Lin Jiufeng stood in front of Mount Daqing and looked at the inconspicuous mountain. He suddenly remembered something about the Dalan Temple. He had never left Jiangnan, let alone visited the Dalan Temple. The information he recalled regarding the Dalan Temple was also what the boatman told Lin Jiufeng on the boat. The Dalan Temple was located on Mount Duqing, but it was unlike Shaolin and Xiankong Temple, which placed a lot of emphasis on its exterior. Countless magnificent Buddha statues were built in those two sects, making their sects look very magnificent and awe-inspiring. The Dalan Temple had paid more attention to the inner workings of their sect. They dug out many caves in Mount Duqing, carving out thousands of Buddhist stories on the walls of those caves, one by one. Generations of the Dalan Temple's seniors had spent their days carving and painting. Countless cultivation techniques, countless divine powers, countless statues, Buddhist stories, and even end-of-epoch paintings were all carved on these caves. On the surface, the Dalan Temple looked like an ordinary Buddhist sect. It wasn't even as beautiful as those small Buddhist sects. But only after entering the Dalan Temple could one truly see Buddha. They could then see the magnificent Buddhist scenery created by a group of low-key and pious monks. But now, the Dalan Temple had sealed off their mountain and didn't receive any believers. This wasn't a problem for Lin Jiufeng. No one could stop him from entering. At the gate of the Dalan Temple, Lin Jiufeng walked in unimpeded. No one detected his presence. Walking into Dalan Temple and on a small mountain path, all he saw was a simple Buddhist sect. It was cold and empty, there was nothing special about it. There weren't even many statues of Buddha, nor were there many monks. It looked empty and desolate. But when Lin Jiufeng walked from the small mountain path to the depths of Mount Duqing, he passed through a tunnel. A brief period of darkness came, and a magnificent Buddhist world appeared before his eyes. The depths of Mount Duqing had been hollowed out. Bodhisattvas, arhats, and yikshas of the Buddhist sects were carved into the mountain. Some of them had kind looks and were pot-bellied, while some of them looked fiendish with green faces and sharp teeth. There were also more than a dozen murals that recorded the descent of Buddha. Beneath a Bodhi tree was a monk chanting scriptures. As he chanted and pondered about Buddhism, the wind and rain beat against him, a python guarded him. The scene of Buddha feeding a hungry bird with his flesh before finally becoming Buddha was also depicted on a mural. The depths of Mount Duqing were lit up by countless illumination stones. These statues and paintings looked lively as if they were alive. As Lin Jiufeng walked inside, he couldn't help but sigh. A huge mountain had been hollowed out just like that. It was tens of thousands of feet high and there were countless caves that had exquisite Buddha statues carved into them. This was the hard work of generations of monks from the Dalan Temple. It was rare to see monks in the outside world, but upon entering the depths of Mount Duqing, one could see monks busy in their painting, carving, and coloring. They seemed to be in a trance, for their movements were steady, skillful, and without waste, making the cold stone carvings seem alive. Each of these monks had chosen one thing to spend the rest of their life on. This was the case for the monks of the Dalan Temple. Lin Jiufeng observed them for a long time. He admired these monks. Thus, he didn't disturb them. Walking along the depths of the Dalan Temple, Lin Jiufeng soon arrived at the back mountain of the temple. The so-called front mountain was Mount Duqing. It was the Dalan Temple's storefront. 90% of their monks were in the front mountain. The back mountain was an inconspicuous hill close to Mount Duqing. The small hill wasn't as tall and majestic as Mount Duqing. But the higher-ups of the Dalan Temple all lived here to suppress something in the small hill. This so-called small hill was 1,000,000 times more dangerous than Mount Duqing. Lin Jiufeng entered the small hill and immediately saw a huge underground cave. It was so deep that no one could see where it ended. Endless black smoke seemed to be coming from it. Fortunately, there was a huge array formation above the hole in the ground. It flickered with an intense golden glow. There were 36 old monks sitting in 36 corners close to the cave entrance. These 36 old monks were the cornerstones of the Dalan Temple. Each of them was at the grotto heaven realm, and most of them were in the middle or late stages. If they showed themselves to the world, they would definitely be considered a major force in today's world. But they remained unknown and nameless in the outside world. No one knew that there were so many hidden powerhouses in the Dalan Temple. Rumble. Lin Jiufeng stood at the edge of the small mountain. He watched as the huge underground cave trembled. An extremely terrifying demonic creature could be seen charging forward. Its boundless aura condensed into a skull that let out a sharp roar, wanting to destroy the seal. But the monks of Dalan Temple weren't to be trifled with either. The 36 monks attacked at the same time. Their mellow Buddhist true chi gathered together as the terrifying phantom of Buddha coalesced behind them. Dawn. The phantom of Buddha slowly pressed down with a palm. The powerful and terrifying aura directly suppressed the demonic creature in the underground cave to the point that it roared angrily. It looked ferocious and vicious, its pair of wolf-like eyes were filled with hatred. It didn't say a word, but the pressure it gave everyone was indescribable. "You guys won't be able to suppress us for so long." Staring at the monks of the Dalan Temple, the demonic creature let out a cackle and slowly sank back down. The danger was temporarily alleviated. The 36 monks heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed. They were exhausted from the exertion just now. "Uncle Masters, you have worked hard. You've once again resolved the danger in the demon's den." A familiar monk appeared and said softly. Lin Jiufeng recognized him. Monk Qingyun. He was different from when he met him in the cold palace back in the imperial capital. After decades, the young and handsome monk had aged considerably. Exhaustion could be seen on his face, but his aura remained vigorous. Supremacy Realm. He broke through into the human god realm not long after Lin Jiufeng. After all these years, he was now at the Supremacy Realm. Qingyun, the demonic creatures here are becoming stronger and stronger. Suppressing them is becoming increasingly difficult. An old monk couldn't help but speak up. "That's right. The demonic creatures here have advanced by leaps and bounds in the past 30 years. Our rate of improvement is far inferior to them. If this continues, this seal can at most suppress them for only another 5 years. Qingyun, don't you know that Miss Hong? Can you ask her to come again?" Exactly, that Miss Hong was the one that had set up the seal back then. "Let's invite her over to reinforce it again." The old monks spoke one after another as they looked at monk Qingyun. The former young monk had now become the abbot of the Dalan Temple and was in charge of everything in the Dalan Temple. After hearing his uncle master's words, he smiled bitterly and replied, "I haven't been able to contact Miss Hong for more than 10 years now." The old monks shook their heads in disappointment. Lin Jiufeng couldn't help but look at monk Qingyun. Wasn't he close to Miss Hong back then? Miss Hong has been working very hard all these years. She has been suppressing all sorts of evil creatures everywhere. She's just a single person, it's bound for her to be overworked. I can't burden her any further. Monk Qingyun shook his head. Amongst the so-called members of the Heavenly Tao, only Miss Hong had awakened so far in this brand new era. How could she suppress the entire world on her own? Lin Jiufeng slowly took a few steps forward. He wanted to take a look at the underground cave. How many demonic creatures were there underground? But when Lin Jiufeng approached, a line of words appeared before his eyes. "Do you want to sign in before a demon's den?" "Sign in," Lin Jiufeng said without hesitation. "Sign in successful. Received a death surrogate puppet." A wooden figurine appeared in Lin Jiufeng's hand. The wooden figurine was exquisitely carved. The details on its body were perfect, but it had no face. The user of the death surrogate puppet will have their face reflected in the puppet's blank face. The explanation appeared in Lin Jiufeng's mind. Its function was simple: the puppet could die for the user once. Lin Jiufeng decisively put away the puppet. It was good stuff. Chapter 139, Slaying Demonic Creatures. Receiving the death surrogate puppet as a sign-in reward was a pleasant surprise for Lin Jiufeng. It was rare for him to receive something like this. This was because these types of items all had miraculous effects, and they were all heaven-defying. Hence, it was very difficult for him to receive something like this as a sign-in reward. For example, the death surrogate puppet could die for someone once. This effect alone was heaven-defying. But it seemed to be useless for Lin Jiufeng. He probably wouldn't be able to use it, but keeping it was still good. After signing in, Lin Jiufeng began to size up the underground cave. The cave was hundreds of feet long and wide. It was huge, bottomless, and shrouded in darkness. Even with Lin Jiufeng's eyes, he could only vaguely see some demonic creatures inside. It was no wonder that 36 Buddhist monks were needed to suppress the creatures in this place. If one wasn't a supreme powerhouse, it would be very difficult to suppress such a huge underground cave. Fortunately, the array formation that Miss Hong had set up back then was created by the members of the Heavenly Tao sect by combining the world's energies into the array formation. Its ingenuity made it so that it was still effective to this day. As Lin Jiufeng was staring at the demon's den, a demonic creature was also staring at him. Their eyes met. The demonic creature's eyes were bloody, terrifying, and filled with killing intent. Lin Jiufeng's eyes were indifferent, calm, and emotionless. At this moment, Lin Jiufeng remembered an adage. When you stared into the abyss would stare back at you. Roar! All of a sudden, the demonic creature let out a loud roar and directly rushed forward, repeating its previous actions from earlier. The surging demonic energy it radiated coalesced into a skull. But it was obvious that it was slightly weaker than the previous skull earlier. This demonic creature was not the same demonic creature as before. Rumble! The demonic creature rushed forward once again, shocking the monks of the Dalan temple. The exhausted 36 old monks were dumbfounded. What's going on? Doesn't this only happen once every 7 days? We've just suppressed it, yet it's already charging at us again? Enough talk. Hurry up and suppress it. The old monks sat in their corners one by one. Ignoring their exhaustion, they executed their Buddhist divine abilities. But it seemed to be too late. The demonic creature was about to rush over. The old monks were apprehensive. They couldn't let the demonic creature rush up to them. If they didn't suppress it in time, it might directly rush to the seal. The seal was already unstable to begin with, it couldn't withstand that kind of impact anymore. If the demonic creature rushed at it a few more times, the seal would break. When that happened, no solution could be done anymore. Lin Jiufeng looked at the anxious old monks and the ferocious-looking demonic creature that was about to rush up to the seal. He calmly stepped forward. Dong! A terrifying force rushed out from beneath Lin Jiufeng's feet. The force passed through the seal and directly collided against the demonic creature. Boom! The demonic creature was directly vaporized. It didn't even manage to let out a scream. The quaking demon's den immediately became silent. The old monks who were busy mobilizing and gathering their true qi looked at each other in confusion. What happened? Why did the demonic creature disappear? The true qi that they had just mobilized, should they continue to gather them or not? They didn't know what to do. The 36 old monks were bewildered. But the onlooker, Monk Xingyun, had an inkling of what had just happened. He looked in Lin Jiufeng's direction, his eyes were filled with shock. He had seen it clearly just now. Before his uncle masters could gather their energy together, a huge force came crashing down and directly vaporized the demonic creature. There was definitely someone else here. Monk Xingyun casually stated. Uncle Masters, you guys have worked hard today. Now that the underground cave has become quiet once again, you should hurry back to rest and recuperate. I will guard this place. If there are any problems, I will inform you all. The old monks looked at each other in confusion. But under the urging of Monk Xingyun, they soon left one by one. Lin Jiufeng watched Monk Xingyun's every move without saying a word. He knew that Monk Xingyun had guessed that there was someone else around. Sure enough, after persuading the old monks to return, Monk Xingyun walked in. He cupped his fists solemnly and stated, Monk Xingyun of Dalan Temple greets the senior. Senior, please show yourself. Lin Jiufeng replied faintly, Are you sure that you want to see me? Back then, Monk Xingyun was quite frightened by Lin Jiufeng. When Miss Hong asked him to deliver all sorts of books to him later on, he only dared to place them in front of the cold palace's gates before leaving in a hurry. Did Monk Xingyun become bolder after all these years? Senior, please show yourself, replied Monk Xingyun firmly. Lin Jiufeng dispersed the veil of the great Tao and no longer concealed his figure. Xingyun's body visibly stiffened. He recalled his determination just now and felt ashamed. Was it too late for regrets? The biggest shadow of Monk Xingyun's life was when he was suppressed by Lin Jiufeng in the cold palace back in the imperial capital of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty. The scene was still vivid in his mind. Despite already being a supremacy realm expert, Monk Xingyun still found the scene of him being suppressed by Lin Jiufeng as terrifying. It was his scariest encounter with someone else to date. Because at that time, he really had no ability to fight back against Lin Jiufeng. He was just like an ant facing a god high up in the sky. That kind of fear had been engraved in Monk Xingyun's heart. Monk Xingyun looked at Lin Jiufeng. He squeezed out an awkward smile and said, "Greetings, senior." Especially Lin Jiufeng's face, which hadn't changed much in decades. His aura, which had become even more unfathomable, also made Monk Xingyun uneasy. He worked hard and eventually arrived at the Supremacy Realm. After ascending to the Supremacy Realm, Monk Xingyun started to think that he was already a powerhouse. But despite all of that, he still couldn't see through Lin Jiufeng. The Lin Jiufeng in front of him was like an immortal that had descended unto the mortal realm. He was peerless and unrivaled. Just at what realm was this terrifying senior at? It's been decades since we last met. Do you still remember me? Lin Jiufeng teased. Xingyun was ashamed. He truly wanted to forget Lin Jiufeng. But how could he forget Lin Jiufeng? The latter had already become a shadow in his life, an inner demon to be precise. Senior, what brought you here? Monk Xingyun hurriedly changed the subject. Lin Jiufeng pointed at the demon's den. It was obvious. How old is this thing? Lin Jiufeng asked. Seeing Lin Jiufeng's calm expression, the anxiety in Monk Xingyun's heart lessened. He replied in a low voice, "It has been 1,000 years since our Dalan temple discovered it. We found out its existence in the previous era. When the ancestors of the Dalan temple discovered it, the seal was already very weak. In order to protect the common people, we built the Dalan temple here. Furthermore, the eminent monks of the past generations have tried their best to maintain the stability of the seal. But unfortunately, a few decades ago, the recovery of the world's spiritual energy started and the seal was broken. When the demonic creatures emerged, they were about to wreak havoc in the Jiangnan area. But they were stopped by Miss Hong, who appeared at that time and suppressed the demonic creatures. She then set up a great sealing array which lasted until now." Monk Xingyun explained. "How many demonic creatures are there underground?" Lin Jiufeng asked. "I didn't count them in detail, but according to the statistics from the past 1,000 years, there should be around 1,000 of them," Monk Xingyun said with uncertainty. "Basically, there were a lot of them. If these 1,000 demonic creatures broke out from the seal, the common people of the world will definitely suffer," said Monk Xingyun with a sigh. Lin Jiufeng nodded. Monk Xingyun was right. The demon's den that he suppressed in the cold palace was filled with beastly demons, but they were clear-headed. Most of those beastly demons weren't existences that would kill wantonly. But the demonic creatures here were different. Lin Jiufeng had seen their bloodthirsty looks just now and he knew at one glance that they were up to no good. Chapter 140, The Jiangnan 100 Ghosts Portrait Shows Its Might. Monk Xingyun looked at Lin Jiufeng meaningfully. He knew that Lin Jiufeng was very powerful. He also knew that Lin Jiufeng was the guardian deity of the Xuanhuang God Dynasty and had the responsibility to protect the people of the dynasty. Hence, he directed a meaningful gaze at Lin Jiufeng. Without blinking. His thoughts were written all over his face. Lin Jiufeng shivered under his gaze. Although there were traces of age on him, Xingyun was still a handsome and charming monk. And he stared at Lin Jiufeng without blinking. What's more, his expression looked wronged and aggrieved. He was giving off a vibe similar to that of a young lady in need. Lin Jiufeng was speechless. Lin Jiufeng knew what Monk Xingyun was thinking. He just wanted Lin Jiufeng to deal with this underground cave, right? Why was there a need to look at him in such a disgusting way? Meow. The white cat had been watching silently all this while. But now, she let out a shriek and stared angrily at Monk Xingyun. The cat felt that her territory was being invaded. Monk Qingyun retreated awkwardly and said, "Senior, may I invite you to take action and get rid of this demon's den?" "No problem." Lin Jiufeng agreed directly. Monk Qingyun was stunned. He didn't expect Lin Jiufeng to agree so readily. "Senior, don't you need to consider it first?" Monk Qingyun asked. "There's no need to think about it. Your Dalan temple discovered this demon's den and suppressed it for more than 1,000 years. Your temple has contributed greatly to the dynasty. I naturally won't decline. Even if not for you guys, for the people of Jiangnan, I will still take action," Lin Jiufeng said. He looked at the bottomless pit with a probing gaze. He wanted to see how many active demonic creatures were inside the cave. After hearing Lin Jiufeng's words, the excited Monk Qingyun asked, "Senior, how do you plan to deal with the demonic creatures in this underground cave? Should we continue to reinforce the seal? This way, the seal can persist for another few decades." Monk Qingyun suggested. "Why should we continue to do something like drinking poison to quench our thirst?" Lin Jiufeng countered. Monk Qingyun asked curiously, "Why is this drinking poison to quench our thirst? The Dalan temple did the same thing back then. Won't they become stronger if you continue to seal them? Aren't these demonic creatures stronger than they were 30 years ago? If we continue to seal them, wouldn't we be letting them quietly become stronger inside? But you won't know this. You're thinking right now that everything will be fine, but when the time comes, they will explode out with their full power and we won't be able to stop them anymore," Lin Jiufeng said in a matter-of-factly way. These words made Qingyun feel ashamed, but at the same time, he felt helpless. "I don't want to do this either, but there are at least 1,000 demonic creatures here. If we don't reinforce the seal, what should we do?" Lin Jiufeng stretched out his hand and pointed. "Then," he said coldly, "naturally, the only way is to kill them." "Kill them?" Monk Qingyun looked at Lin Jiufeng, dumbfounded. "There are 1,000 demonic creatures there, and they are powerhouses. If it wasn't for this heavenly Dao sealing array, our Dalan temple would have already been destroyed by them. How were they supposed to kill these demonic creatures?" Lin Jiufeng looked at Monk Qingyun calmly and asked, "These so-called 1,000 demonic creatures that you've mentioned, are they really powerful?" Monk Qingyun was about to say that they were very powerful, but he quickly shook his head after taking a look at Lin Jiufeng. "Of course, they aren't as powerful as you." "Since they aren't as powerful as me, I can kill them then," Lin Jiufeng replied. "It's not just one or two demonic creatures though. There are at least 1,000 demonic creatures there. An army of ants can even kill an elephant," Monk Qingyun explained. "Even if there are 5,000 demonic creatures in there, they are still lambs waiting to be slaughtered. There's no need for you to worry about them. If you don't agree to kill them, then you can handle the demonic creatures yourself." "I won't help anymore," Lin Jiufeng said lightly. Monk Qingyun's expression turned vicious as he shouted, "Kill them! They deserve death. I support you in killing these demonic creatures, Senior. The Buddhist sects are particular about not killing, but if killing a demonic creature can save tens of thousands of people, I will do it. Let alone killing these demonic creatures. I will be the first to support you, Senior. I will do whatever Senior says." Monk Qingyun's expression changed in an instant. Right now, he was 100% supportive of Lin Jiufeng. As for him handling the demon's den on his own, he was unwilling to do such a thing. Since Lin Jiufeng said that he wanted to kill the demonic creatures in the underground cave, Monk Qingyun would just do as Lin Jiufeng said. After all, even if the sky fell, there would be taller people to hold and support the sky for the weaker ones down below. Lin Jiufeng looked at Monk Qingyun and smiled. The latter's heart jumped. "Senior, since you said that you want to kill them, how are you going to do it?" Monk Qingyun hurriedly asked. "I'll kill them directly. Just remove the seal and let them come out." "Let's kill them all," Lin Jiufeng replied casually. "Isn't that too dangerous?" Monk Qingyun murmured. "Do you have a better solution?" Lin Jiufeng squinted at him. "No, I will listen to Senior." "Then, shall I undo the seal now?" Monk Qingyun immediately shook his head and replied decisively. Guard the entrance for me. Don't let anyone in. I will open the seal now. Lin Jiufeng instructed Monk Qingyun. Monk Qingyun was very obedient. He immediately guarded the entrance and raised his guard. He positioned himself in a way that he could easily slip away if something went wrong. Lin Jiufeng ignored him and looked at the heavenly Dao array that Miss Hong had set up. His eyes glistened as he looked at the array. There's nothing special about this array, except that its connection to the heavenly Dao is pretty good. As expected of a member of the heavenly Dao sect, its affinity with the heavenly Dao is extraordinary. Lin Jiufeng muttered calmly as he analyzed the structure of the array. If the affinity to the heavenly Dao of an ordinary person was 1, then the affinity to the heavenly Dao of the people from the heavenly Dao sect was 10. Or maybe even higher. But Lin Jiufeng wasn't envious. Those with high affinity and those who were members of the heavenly Dao sect were indeed blessed with ample benefits and opportunities, but it also meant that they had a responsibility to shoulder. For example, Miss Hong suppressed the experts of the previous era time and time again, as she did her best to delay their return to the world. This was the responsibility of the people from the heavenly Dao sect. She couldn't escape this responsibility. Hence, Lin Jiufeng wasn't envious of her. After observing for a while, Lin Jiufeng directly stomped his foot. Boom! The seal instantly exploded. Lin Jiufeng used brute force to crush the seal. The huge impact was directly carried by him into the depths of the demon's den. Dong dong dong. A huge explosion happened in the underground cave. Sonic waves spread out and shook the ground. The demonic creatures in the underground cave woke up one by one. They looked up and saw that the seal had disappeared. Roar! 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 Roars that shook the sky reverberated as they rushed out of the cave. The vibrations spread across the entire Dalan Temple. The monks of Dalan Temple were petrified. They all rushed over. All of you, stay where you are. There's no need for you to come over. I've hired an expert to handle this, don't get involved. Monk Qingyun roared, not letting them come over to disturb Lin Jiufeng. Fortunately, the monks of Dalan Temple were obedient. They stopped and watched nervously. As for the demonic creatures in the demon's den, they rushed up rapidly, brandishing their fangs and claws. They were in all sorts of strange shapes, looking aggressive and terrifying. When their auras overlapped, even Lin Jiufeng's aura seemed insignificant. But Lin Jiufeng didn't fight with them. He took a step back and took out something. Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts Portrait. Lin Jiufeng injected all of his true qi into the painting and activated the Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts Portrait. Shuash! A painting unfurled, blocking the entrance of the demon's den. The terrifying demonic creatures rushed forward one after another, only to crash against the Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts Portrait. The Xuanhuang 100 Ghosts Portrait itself was an immortal artifact. Thus, it was extremely powerful. Although it lacked a portion of its power, with Lin Jiufeng's help, it was able to capture the demonic creatures and instantly use the energy inside the portrait to kill them in an instant.